Councillor McBurney seconding. And we'll wait for Clerk Lamb to come back. He must be helping somebody with some tech.
Sorry, Deputy Reeve-Sype. We just, I didn't have recording permission, so now the recording is there now. So,
Would like me to start again?
If you could, that might be a good idea for members of the public who will watch after. Yep.
So I will call this meeting of January 17th regular council meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land in which we gather is a traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Waukee, Ottawa, and Mississauga peoples. And we'll move on to the confirmation of the agenda that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby accept the agenda for January 17th, 2020 meeting as presented. And I had Councillor Faulkner moving that, and I had Councillor McBurney seconding it.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sype. So, Councillor Faulkner?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
And Deputy Reeve-Sype?
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Okay, we'll move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. Is there any other councillors that wish to declare anything at this point? Not seeing any, but I have to declare.
Reeve Bailey has joined the meeting now, Deputy Reeve-Sype, and it looks like he wants to declare as well.
Yes, thank you very kindly. I just joined the meeting and I haven't got set up here, so I want to make sure I'm not part of the discussion for the 5-story unit building going down in the old trailer park. I will stay out of that one. Thank you.
Okay, and I will, I'm going to declare an indirect conflict on items number 6.1, 7.1.1, 10.7, and 12.1. And the reason for my disclosure is due to my indirect conflict with the applicants of the 6.1 and 7.1.1 and 12.1 and 10.7 as a result of my employment. I will also be declaring and not participating in the closed session, as that closed session, I have an indirect conflict due to my employment with the party that's relating to the relocation of the North Huron Museum. So I will be declaring and not participating in that conversation either. Is there, okay, so we're gonna move on to public comment. So an opportunity for members of the public to speak on an item of business on the agenda, 2 minutes per person. I do want to acknowledge that we have received a significant amount of correspondence and letters as it relates to the 7.11 as well. And one thing we would like is that if you could keep your, if the people who have called in or have joined the meeting, keep your video off and your phone on mute until you want to have a chance to speak. So that will give us a chance to make sure that we're not bombarded by a number of people talking at the same time. So is there anybody out there that has that would like to make public comment at this point?
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello, it's Karen Decker and Michael Woodman. And I think we've done this correctly. We would simply like to make a couple of comments. We stated in December that the 5-story building was not the best use of the former trailer park site. We do stand by that statement, but we now speak from 4 weeks of dialogue and investigation into the issues. We've tried to separate fact from hearsay. We've learned that a belief system has existed where people felt not heard, but the parkland issue has enabled people to find their voices, to speak of what really matters to them, and it has shown that the town, the councillors, the developers have all welcomed their concerns. So that is excellent progress, and bravo to all. We have also spoken to 4 councillors, and I apologize to Anita, who tried to get through to me. The councillors have shown integrity and thoughtfulness and great interest in addressing the issues expressed by the town residents. You welcomed our concerns, and you were very responsive. We also believe that you have intense pressures from many quarters about this proposed development and the need for housing. In speaking with neighbors, we still feel that preserving the parkland remains a priority for them. It's a desire to respect the environment, to keep green space that once lost is lost forever. Finally, all of the township staff, the county planner, the developers, the councillors, and the residents have been open and helpful. Jonathan and Brock have spoken to us on numerous occasions and tried to respond. Everyone has been responding. We need a plan that will be realistic and responsible to all. Will it be a perfect plan meeting each individual need? No. Can the solution be one of careful, thoughtful compromise that will consider everything? Yes. And perspective is everything. Can we choose a positive perspective on whatever decision is made? Yes. Thank you to all of you. We're confident this healthy dialogue and consideration will continue and therefore create actions and an outcome that is understood and respected by all. And thank you to Hannah for helping us get on when our computer carked at the last minute. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. So is there anybody else out there that would like to make comment on anything on the agenda? Not necessarily hearing any or seeing any. Please feel free to speak up as I can't see everybody.
I'm not seeing anyone else unmute themselves, Deputy Reeve-Sype.
Okay, so we will move on to number 5, which is the consent agenda. So I will, before I take a motion, is there anything in the consent agenda that a member of council would like to pull out and discuss or have questions on or anything like that? Is there anything in that they would wish to bring out at this point? Oh, Reeve Bailey.
Thank you very much. 5.3.1.3. I don't recall, did we already send a letter of support for having this happen with our hospital, or just if somebody can refresh my memory? I don't think we have, but if we have not, I'd like to send a letter of support for the MRI machine proposal.
Yes,
I believe Reeve Bailey, we did send a letter, or I'd asked staff to send a letter of support for that MRI machine.
Thank you very much.
And if I may, Deputy Reeve-Sype, and both that letter and the request are included on the council agenda package for the benefit of the public. Just in case members of the public were wondering why the letter was sent already, it's because of those tight timelines that were required as part of the request for support for the proposal. So both the original request received and the letter sent by the municipality are included on the agenda package.
Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Reeve. The 5.3.2, the Clinton Hospital's Foundation Board of Directors Fundraising Committee, a letter of the gala event on that. Had we participated in that one before? Does anyone know, staff know if that's a regular occurrence or whether that's just a being asked of us new?
To my knowledge, we have not received the request, at least since I've been here since 2019. So that would lead to me to believe it is new. However, we could certainly look into that further Councillor Falconer and let council know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else from anybody else that would like to pull out anything. So I will take the motion. The recommended motion is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent items 5.1.1 to 5.1.2. And further, the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.3 to 5.3.14 for information. Do I have a mover of that motion? I've got Councillor Palmer moving. Do I have a seconder, please? I've got Councillor McBurney seconding. Clerk Lamb.
Deputy Reeves site. So Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeves site,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
But just at this point, as we are in a kind of right at the next topic, Reeve Bailey, are you wishing to continue to, do you wish to go back to being the chair, or do you want me to continue? What is your hope?
If council doesn't mind, I would like Deputy Reeves to continue. I may have to leave the meeting again. I do apologize. It's just one of those days today, continuing on into the night. So if you don't mind, Deputy Reeves, and then I will pull out for you if I'm still on for when you have to leave.
That being said, Reeve Bailey, so Deputy Reeve Sipes declared a conflict of interest on the next agenda item. So if you wouldn't mind chairing anyways.
I will do that. Thank you. Public meetings, hearings, and delegations. 6.1 is Matt Hash, GM Blue Plan presented by Engineers Report for the Whitfield Municipal Drain Relocation Project 2022. So I believe we have someone's going to speak to this. I believe Hannah, is it?
Nope, Matt Ash is joining us on the call, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Matt, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Mr. Reeve. Tonight you have before you quite a small report for the Whitfield Municipal Drain, which is just north of Blythe. The reason for this particular report was there is an ongoing subdivision development, which many of you are probably familiar with in Blythe, called the Rutledge development. And as part of their phase 2 works, they need a short section of the existing drain relocated off of their property. And the reason is there are zoning bylaw setbacks to houses from drains. And if the drain remains where it is, it will impact at least 2 of the proposed residential lots in that subdivision. The work involved is, as I said, a very short relocation, about 62 meters of drain tile, as well as an offset catch basin to take drainage away from not only the lots, but the low area of the field. The costs for this work are entirely assessed to the subdivider, Mr. Rutledge, who I believe is here tonight, actually. And we estimated at around $16,000. We also provided crop damage and land allowance to the 2 neighboring landowners who are directly affected by this work to compensate them for the use of their lands. However, after it's installed, they will, of course, not be aware that it's there because it's entirely buried and will no longer be visible. Because it's not agriculture related, of course, there's no MAFRA grant available for this work. Mr. Rutledge, I believe, is proceeding with phase 2 of his subdivision in the very near future. And my suggestion to Carson was that this work be included in his phase 2 development agreement. That way the township is covered off for insurance purposes and whatnot. There's really no need to tender this as he'll be doing work there anyway, and he's paying for it all. So he might as well just go ahead and do it. Your package, I believe, includes 2 drawings, one showing the overall watershed, and the second one is the actual construction drawing from the subdivision showing the short relocation. Relatively simple. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I will open it up to councilors now. If I don't see you, please speak up if you'd like to speak to this. Not hearing or seeing anyone. The motion is that the Council of Township.
Reeve
Yes.
Bailey, if I may here as well, just because it's a public meeting for the drain, landowners assessed or landowners included in the watershed are to be provided an opportunity to speak on the project if they wish to do so. We have a number of individuals online, so I guess if anyone wanted to speak to the engineer's report as presented by Matt, then now would be your opportunity to do so.
My apologies, and again, I don't see everybody on my site here, so if you want to speak up, if you want to say anything to this. Not hearing or seeing of anyone. Now to the councilors, Carson.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Thank you kindly. So any councilors have any questions, concerns, or comments on this one? And again, I'm not seeing anyone, so I'll read the written that the Council Township of North Huron hereby adopts the engineer's report for the Whitfield Municipal Drain Relocation Project 2022 as presented by Matt Ash, GM Blue Plan. And further that the council provisionally adopt the first and second reading of bylaw number 08-2022. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving and I have Rick seconding. Thank you kindly. Carson, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Deputy Sipes declared a pecuniary interest. So Councillor Falconer
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Thank you kindly. Deputy Sipes, did you want to take over at 6.2?
Yes, sir. Yes, Your Worship. I will do that if you wish for me to do that.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to 6.2, which is the zoning bylaw amendment, file number 09 or Z09 2021, municipally initiated cannabis housing amendment. So I will actually turn this over to Hannah from Heron County Planning, and she can walk us through this amendment.
Thank you once again for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm just going to just share my screen to bring my presentation up. Great. So you should all be able to see my presentation. So as noted before, the following is a zoning bylaw amendment as initiated by the municipality applicable to all the lands within the township of North Huron. Just to provide some background, so on the regular Township Council meeting on December 6, 2021, the Township passed a motion to direct the planner to prepare an amendment to the North Huron zoning bylaw to establish provisions for setbacks to sensitive uses and other related uses from cannabis production facilities. So as such, a zoning bylaw amendment was initiated and was circulated publicly for this public meeting tonight. Just to provide a bit of background again, so the North Huron zoning bylaw does permit cannabis production facilities currently in the following zones. So the general and light industrial zones, as well as the general agricultural zone and the agricultural commercial industrial zone. Cannabis production facilities are currently defined in the bylaw as those to support the production, processing, and packaging of cannabis, and those that require a license from the associated federal ministry. This definition does include holding facilities, as I do know that was a point of discussion at the previous council meeting. In terms of the proposed amendment, this is included as part of bylaw in council's agenda this evening, as well as my report does go into further detail. But just to summarize the intent of the proposed amendment, it's to introduce general provisions in section 3, which contains the general provisions of the zoning bylaw, to introduce setbacks between cannabis production facilities and sensitive uses. So sensitive uses in this case are defined as lands that are zoned for residential or community facility uses, a commercial recreational facility, park, or similar recreational use, a dwelling, public school, private school, place of worship, community center, or a daycare. So that is what is defined as a sensitive use in this case. Setbacks in this case would not be applicable to dwellings located on the same titled property as a cannabis facility. This is because if it was part of the same titled property, that dwelling would be considered to be participating in the activity on that property. In terms of the proposed setbacks, specific to the general agriculture and agricultural commercial industrial zones, a minimum 150 meter setback to sensitive uses is required for facilities with air treatment control, and a minimum of 300 meters of a setback is proposed for facilities without air treatment control. The bylaw also includes a definition for defining air treatment control. In terms of the general industrial zones, and as well as the light industrial zone, a minimum setback of 150 meters to sensitive uses would be required in this case. In this case, the proposed bylaw includes that air treatment shall be required when it is in the industrial zones, typically because those would be located in settlement areas, and production must be located entirely within a wholly enclosed building. Additionally, the proposed amendment has further details on providing provisions for the location of accessory security structures and prohibiting outdoor storage. So typically with these production facilities, you will see security buildings at the front of the facility. And it also reiterates that the establishment or expansion of these facilities would be subject to site plan control. In terms of the policy review, so zoning bylaw amendments are required to be consistent with the provincial policy statement and conform to the county official plan and North Huron official plan. Generally speaking, the amendment is consistent and does conform to these policy documents. They generally speak to protecting sensitive uses from industrial uses such as cannabis production facilities, but also with balancing this with providing economic development opportunities for industries. So the intent of this development is that it seeks to strike that balance. The proposed provisions are similar in nature to other provisions adopted across the province. So as my report goes into further detail, these provisions were modified from bylaws adopted in Norfolk County because their department actually did do some odor studies there. And they are similar to other municipalities across Ontario. And in particular, similar approaches have been adopted to neighboring municipalities in Huron County to North Huron, including ACW, Central Huron, and Morris Turnberry. In terms of comments, Township of North Huron staff didn't indicate any no concerns, but they did provide input on the draft bylaw. In terms of other agencies that were circulated on this, no comments were received as of current. And similarly, neighbors or members of the public have not provided written comments as of right now. In addition to the amendments that I went over previously, so the bylaw was circulated in December for this public meeting, and upon then and then getting further comments from staff, it was determined that it might be valuable to specify where a planting strip or a fence to provide some site buffering would be appropriate. So my report includes a recommendation that the bylaw as circulated be revised to also include this additional provision for that cannabis production facilities on lands in the industrial zones that abut lands that are otherwise not zoned or used for industrial uses or utilities along the interior or rear lot lines. So that's when a planting strip will be provided. Basically every instance where the property would abut a property that's not already used for an industrial use or utility use. It is worth noting that in the existing bylaw, cannabis production facilities in the agricultural zone would be considered agricultural, commercial, industrial uses, and they already have specific requirements for planting strips in that case. In terms of a recommendation, it is recommended that the zoning bylaw amendment as presented to council be approved, subject to the recommended revisions to include references to requirements for planting strips or site fencing for industrial properties. Should council be agreeable to the proposed revisions, an additional motion is required by council that a change has been made to the zoning bylaw, but that no further notification is required. So that is provided on this following slide here. And essentially the effect of this motion is just saying that a public meeting was held with respect to this and certain changes have been made to the proposed bylaw after the holding of the public meeting, and that council is of the opinion that the changes were of a nature that no further notice is required. It's also worth noting if council has any suggested changes to the bylaw as otherwise presented to them, a similar motion would also be required. And then I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on to the opportunity to comment on an application by the applicant or the agent. Well, we are the applicant. So, I mean, let's go on to the next opportunity to comment by others in attendance. Not hearing any. Opportunity for councillors to ask questions or make comments. Is there any councillors? I got Councillor Palmer. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Reeve. Yeah, to Hannah, 2 questions, and it's curiosity. How effective is the air treatment control that is mentioned?
Right. So through your worship, I can answer that. So it's difficult to say. I think the challenge with regulating cannabis in Ontario is there's not a lot of evidence on how these bylaws have been utilized in municipal settings for managing odor. The expectation would be that there would be air treatment control that would reduce the odor impact. I don't disagree that there may be challenges with quantifying to what extent that reduces the odor. But I will say typically across Ontario, and I did cite a study in my report, typically there is a reduced setback for facilities that do have air treatment control versus those that do not. Again, I wouldn't be able to say with certainty if that would completely eliminate odor impacts, but it's certainly the intent of the air treatment control would be that it would mitigate and reduce it.
And to follow up,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, I'm curious about that building beside Brophy's there, like near Heron. Is that a distribution or collection area? Do you know? And is there, first of all, is it a marijuana facility?
Through your worship, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the particular site that you're referencing. The definition for cannabis production facilities does speak to the processing and holding of cannabis products, but it also specifies that it would follow the definition under the federal legislation for being licensed. So unfortunately, I don't know the specifics of that site that I would be able to comment on that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery building. Brand new. Anyways, we'll see.
Is there any other comments or questions by members of council?
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead,
Councillor.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Reeve. I'm just curious, on the 300 meters, like with the trails that go around, that's taken in consideration for the trails that are around the outside of the town and whatnot. That's looked after in that 300 meter one for non-treatment areas. That's far enough protection.
Correct. Through your worship, yes. So the sensitive uses as defined in this bylaw include park or similar recreational use. I would interpret that to include recreational trails.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments by members of council? If I'm not able to see you, feel free to speak up. Okay, I'm not hearing any, so I'll move on to the zoning bylaw procedure following the public meeting. So this is a public meeting of council of the Township of North Huron. Thus, a decision of council may or may not be made this evening on the zoning bylaw amendment. If the bylaw is passed by council and the clerk is required to send notice of the passing of the bylaw to persons or public bodies that have made a written request to be notified of the decision. There is a 20-day objection period from the time a notice of passing of the bylaw has been mailed by first-class post, wherein submissions, letters of objection, or support in respect to the passing of the bylaw will be received by the clerk. If an objection is received, an appeal is lodged with the Ontario Land Tribunal, and at that point, the township no longer has any control over the time factor involved. If council does not pass a bylaw, the applicant may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If the bylaw is passed and no objection is received within the objection period, the clerk certifies that the bylaw is in force and in effect as of the date of the passing, and notice is forwarded to the Huron County Planning Department, Huron County Planning and Development Department. So we'll move on to the summary of comments and recommendations of the Huron County Planning and Development Department. Please, Hannah.
Thank you. I will just share my presentation again. So in terms of the effective comments, it is recommended that council select option A2, that no public comments were received on this application, so there was no effect on the decision, and that option B3B selected, that agency comments were received in support of the application, the effect of which resulted in a decision to approve the application.
Okay, so I will go to 6.2.7, which is the decision of council affecting of comments received. So I will look for a motion that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves the zoning bylaw amendment file Z09-2021, subject to recommended revisions to include planting strip to include planting strip requirements. Do I have a mover of that motion? I've got Councillor Faulkner moving. Do I have a seconder? I got Councillor Van Henderson second. Clerk Lamb, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sipe. So Councillor Heffer, Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve-Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Sorry, yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
And just going on to the recommendations from the chart, so that the Township of North Huron Council for the zoning bylaw amendment file would be no public comments were received, and agency comments were received in support of the application and no effect on the decision. Do I have a mover of that? I've got Councillor Van Henderson moving. I've got Councillor Faulkner seconding.
Thanks for bearing with me there. So your motion would be that for zoning bylaw amendment file Z09-2021, no public comments were received on this application, so there was no effect on the decision, and agency comments were received in support of the application, the effect of which resulted in a decision to approve the application. So Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve-Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
And the last part of this motion is the Council of the Township of North Huron has held a public meeting pursuant to Section 3412 of the Planning Act with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw. And whereas certain changes have been made to the proposal bylaw after the holding of the public meeting, now therefore the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby resolves that the pursuant to Section 3417 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, subsection P13, the changes were of such a nature that no further notice should be given to respect to the proposed bylaw prior to its passing. Do I have a mover of that one? I have a Councillor Van Hitterson moving. I've got Reeve Bailey seconding.
So Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, so we will move on to 7.1.1, which I believe myself as well as the Reeve have declared pecuniary interest on these ones. So Clerk Lamb, I would ask we get a mover to for a member of council to take the chair at this point.
Yeah, so thank you, Deputy Reeve Sipe. So basically, I'm looking for a motion to appoint a councillor to chair agenda item 7.1.1. So is there any councillor who would like to put their name forward?
I'll put my name forward, Kevin.
So Councillor Falconer moves. Is there a seconder for that?
I will second that.
And Councillor Van Hitterson seconds. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby appoints Councillor Falconer to chair agenda item 7.1.1. So this would be a recorded vote. So Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So
that motion carries 7-0. So Councillor Falconer, if you want to assume the chair.
Okay, thank you for the appointment. Okay, planning 2022-03, the application of the official plan amendment for OPA 15 and zoning bylaw amendment Z07-21 follow-up report. I don't know, Hannah, do you have any follow-up to add to this then?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will just share, I do not have a presentation, but I will just share my report, and then I just have some comments to make on my report just to summarize. So the following report, as stated before, is with respect to an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications on subject lands described as 166 John Street West in Wingham, commonly known as the former Wingham Trailer Park site. As council will recall, this file is for a 73-unit apartment building on the subject lands. Council will recall that a public meeting for this item was held on December 20th during the regular council meeting. At this meeting, there were several oral comments received from members of the public, in addition to several written comments that were received prior to the meeting and since the meeting, as shown on this council's agenda. At the public meeting, council made a motion that partially included direction from staff to work with interested parties to identify possible resolutions to issues and concerns raised. Staff are currently actively working with interested parties, including members of the public that provided comments, and the proposed developer of the project to facilitate further correspondence and address prevailing comments. In particular, currently the developer is actively addressing comments by responding to individuals that provided written comments and providing further information to clarify their questions or provide further information with respect to their concerns. It is anticipated as well that the developer will prepare a summary of their responses to the prevailing comments received from the public public for information for council at a future meeting. These responses, as well as public comments received, will be summarized as part of a future recommendation report for council by the county planner. As these discussions remain ongoing, additional time would be beneficial to further facilitate this process. And as such, it is recommended that its decision on the file be deferred at this time. The purpose of the additional time, again, is to provide the developer an opportunity to provide their summary of their responses to the comments as an information for council, provide time for staff to work with members of the public to parse through their prevailing comments of concern, and if needed, staff can engage in further dialogue with the commenters. And as well provide an opportunity for the planner recommendation report to provide a more comprehensive picture of the public and proponent perspective on the applications, in addition to providing technical planning advice that considers information received in the comments, as well as the relevant policy documents. The ultimate goal of this additional time is to provide council with a clearer understanding of the prevailing comments and perspectives, including how these were addressed or considered, in order to hopefully facilitate an overall more well-informed report so council can make an overall more informed decision on the applications. It's important to remember in this case that a consensus on these issues may not be feasible, nor is that necessarily the goal. But however, the goal of this additional time would be to summarize the comments received to the best of the ability so council understands the multiple perspectives on this file. Again, as responses to comments and dialogue is still ongoing, it is recommended that the decision on the applications be deferred at this time. At a future council meeting, a recommendation report of the county planner will be provided to council that summarizes the outcomes of these further discussions and summarizes public comments and how the developer was able to address or consider these comments. And as such, it is also recommended that North Huron receive this report for information. And I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have about this update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hannah, for your leadership. Any comments from council? Hannah? Go ahead, Anita.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. I would like to know how much time you were looking at. Is it 2 weeks or 2 months?
Thank you. Through your chair, Councillor. It would be expected that a recommendation report would be brought at one of the meetings in February. That's what's anticipated. We certainly have it in the back of our mind that we also want to see the file move forward. So we are not planning for significant delays, but just a little bit of additional time just to address those further comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I can't see everybody in one frame here, so speak up if there's anyone else. If not, I'll read the motion. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Chris Palmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think, you know, reading all the correspondence and reading the responses back from the developer, you know, there's a lot of comments that you know, maybe aren't going to go anywhere, and it's kind of obvious from our standpoint, but there are some good ones, and we need to, I'm totally in favor of deferring of this recommendation from Hannah, because I'm hoping that, you know, there is a bit of a give and take. It don't make everybody happy, that's for sure, but it'd be nice to come up with some sort of consensus. Thank you.
Then I send Mr. Heffer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very much in favor of deferring it for whatever it takes there, just for the clear understanding, and so we can make as a council an informed decision here. So I go with what the recommendation is there. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, I'll read the motion. The Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the planner regarding application OPA 15 and Z07-21 dated January 13th, 2022 for information purposes. And further, that the council hereby defers the decision of the application excuse me, of OPA 15 and the Z07-21 to provide more time for staff to work with interested parties to address comments received and incorporate the outcome in future planning report with a recommendation. Do I have a motion, or do I have Rick making a motion, and I have Mr. Heffer seconding it. Back to you, Mr. Lamb.
Thank you, Chair Falconer. So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
So that motion carries 5-0.
I turn it back to you, Mr. Lamb, to carry forward and bring the rest of the council back.
Thanks, Councillor Falconer. So it looks like Deputy Reeve Sype has joined us, and Reeve Bailey will be joining us again. So Deputy Reeve Sype, if you want to assume the chair again.
Thank you, Clerk Lamb. So we'll move on to 7.1.2, which is PL 2022-04 North Huron official 5-year plan review. Request to commence the review. So I will I'll turn this over to Hannah as well, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I will just share my presentation, and I will note that Denise Van Amersfoort, our department's manager of planning, is also sitting out on this meeting tonight for information. She'll also be helping lead this project. So I'm just going to share my screen just to bring up my presentation. So the following presentation is a request of Council to initiate the review of their official plan. Just to provide a bit of background on the current North Huron official plan. So this official plan was initially adopted in 2004, and it replaced the original official plans of Wingham, Blythe, and East Wawanach. And it was developed with extensive public consultation and adopted in 2004. The official plan was further reviewed and updated in 2013. In terms of the legislative basis for official plan reviews, the Planning Act requires a review of an official plan within 5 years. Given that the last review occurred in 2013, it's well within the time frame that another review is warranted. As well, in addition, local official plans are required to be consistent with the provincial policy statement and the county official plan. These two documents have been recently reviewed and updated. The provincial policy statement in 2020 and the county official plan update was adopted late last year. And lastly, the review provides an opportunity to update the policies and mapping in the official plan to better reflect the current and future land use priorities existing in North Huron today. In terms of the process for an official plan review, legislatively, at a minimum, the following must occur. So Council initially would first need to host a special meeting of Council at the beginning of the process. This is sometimes referred to as a Section 26 meeting in reference to the section of the Planning Act that requires this. And the purpose of this is to begin the process of discussing any required revisions that may be needed to the official plan. In addition, Council is required at some point in the process to hold an open house on the draft official plan amendment. This will be open to the public and typically would be the time where staff would be able to engage in dialogue with members of the public. And lastly, a public meeting would be held at the meeting in which Council would adopt the official plan amendment. And again, this represents the absolute minimum requirements legislatively for going through the process. On my next slide, I do provide further detail on the timelines for the process that are proposed. My report does provide a more detailed overview. So just to summarize the key points, so my report does recommend that Council provide a direction to schedule that first special public meeting, so the Section 26 meeting in February. The purpose of this meeting would be to discuss any revisions that may be required to the official plan. In March, staff will aim for presenting a draft amendment to Council to get their initial feedback, and as well at this meeting there would be discussion about scheduling the open houses. In April, we have that slated as a possible date for the public open houses. Again, the purpose of that would be to provide consultation with members of the public. And given, depending on the response that we get from the public, as well as other consultation that we engage with agencies or community groups and landowners, another draft amendment would be presented to North Huron Council again, and we have that aimed for June. And then through that, based on the response received from council, as well as ongoing consultation with members of the public and agencies, further public meeting would be held ideally in August to consider an adoption of the amendment. So under the Planning Act, local amendments to local official plans are required to be approved by county council. So we have also budgeted in the timeline for approval of the amendment to occur at Huron County Council following adoption at the local level. So that is aimed for September or October. It's worth noting, again, this is a summary of the key highlights of the process. It's worth noting that throughout this process, staff members would be engaging with members of the public, community groups, prescribed agencies, as well as landowners to discuss possible changes. And as well as we would have ongoing communication with township staff to also get their perspective. In terms of a consultation approach, again, this would be ongoing throughout the work plan. We would like to consult with key community groups that are included or not limited to these highlighted groups that we've identified here. So the Wingham BIA, Chamber of Commerce, the Blythe BIA, Festival Theatre, our cultural groups, the Amish and Old Order communities, as well as additional community groups as interest is expressed. As part of this process, we would also consult with key agencies and organizations. So the Planning Act does require that we send notice to prescribed agencies. And then depending on the interest for those agencies, we would consult with them further. One example of that is the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. We would consult with them as well as having consultation with key township staff. So staff like public works staff or would be very valuable to have their input as well. So we intend to consult with them. In terms of consultation with landowners, our work plan does propose that for any proposed mapping changes, that letters be sent to landowners in this case, and so that we can facilitate dialogue with these individual landowners. Our work plan does account for the hosting of drop-in times and scheduling of site visits as needed to assess any mapping changes. And additionally, throughout the process, we would consult with the public. So again, those open house meetings that we have proposed, the public meetings at council in which members of the public are able to speak if they'd like, or their comments may be presented, as well as our work plan does account for drop-in times as needed, which members of the public, if they'd like to speak about an individual issue, could schedule a time to discuss this with planning staff. It's worth noting that the consultation approach will be dependent on the evolving public health situation. At this time, we are anticipating online consultation methods, but we will, of course, monitor the public health situation and adapt as required, but it is likely that it would be online at this time. In terms of a communication strategy, we intend to provide regular updates to the public via establishing a project page on Huron County Connects, which I can provide a demo to council in the next slide. This will be supplemented by references on the township website and township social media to this project page. As mentioned previously, we intend to send letters to landowners that have mapping amendments as per council direction, and we would have consultation meetings with community groups as they are interested. And again, drop-in time offered for individuals to discuss property-specific matters. So I will just, if you just bear with me and give me a moment, I will just show council essentially how Huron County Connects works. If you just give me a moment. Okay, so hopefully council can see my screen here. So this is Huron County Connects. And essentially what this is it's a web platform that allows staff to have a project page for specific projects across the county. And it really is the best way for staff to provide continuous updates on the project to members of the public. I will just show, so for example, the county is looking at intersection improvements. So this is an example of what the page could look like. So members of the public would be able to see who are the key staff assigned to the file and have our contact information. We can regularly provide updates as the process is going along. In addition to prescribed notices for public meetings, we can also provide updates here as well. The site does allow us to upload documents as they are received and provide key dates and a project timeline to ensure that the public is informed. So we are proposing that this be included as part of the communication strategy because it is a really great communicative tool, and it's also a great way for us to keep things current and updated as new reports are received by council and there's further updates in the process. I'm just going to reshare my presentation. Just give me a moment. And again, this will be supplemented by postings to the by a link to the township website to direct members of the public to this, and as well as township social media. In terms of next steps, my report does go into this in greater detail, but this report is seeking direction from council to staff, whether they would like to commence the review. And if so, we are also looking for direction from council to schedule a special public meeting to discuss the revisions to the official plan that may be required. It is recommended that the meeting be held on Thursday, February 24th, 2022. So we can discuss further the most suitable time for that. I have been made aware of the clerk that there may be another, I'm not sure which BIA meets that evening, but there is a meeting at 6 p.m. that day. So we can discuss that further, what time would be best for the meeting. And then we would proceed with publishing the notice of that public meeting on February 25th. And then at that point, we would inform the key agencies and key community groups of the process, in addition to publicly publishing the notice. So in terms of the recommendation, this is taken from my report, is recommended that council commence a review of the Township of North Huron official plan under Section 26 of the Planning Act, and that a special meeting of council open to the public be held February 24th, 2022 to discuss revisions to the official plan that may be required. So I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Hannah. Is there any questions from before a motion, before I look at the recommended motion? Is there any questions or comments by members of council? Reid Bailey.
Thank you very kindly, Deputy Reeve Site. Just wondering, so I believe we're sitting on the old official plan that's about 5 years old, 6 years old, or even older now. So Hannah, are you suggesting that we go right to before the council itself gets together and has a conversation about where things are now and where we'd like to hit and the hard work that this council has done, how we'd like to see that put in there? Is that part of, are you suggesting making that part of the public meeting? Or are you suggesting, like when we did the strategic plan, that we as a council got together and put our heads together on where we thought we should go as with our strategic plan, and then developed it to a public meeting?
Thank you. Through the chair, I can answer that, and then I can also divert to Denise Van Amersfoort if she has any further comments. So the meeting on February 24th is required to be a public meeting, and the intent of that would be that staff would likely work with council to go through revisions that they see being required to the official plan. So that would be something we would probably go by each section in the official plan and discuss potential revisions that could be incorporated. I'm not sure if Denise has anything else to add there.
Oh, thank you, Hannah. Through the chair to Reeve Bailey, this would certainly be an opportunity for council to hear from members of the public as to some of the issues that they would like to see addressed during the time of the 5-year review. And then it would be very appropriate to schedule a special council meeting or a special time with council to have a more in-depth discussion with council. Once you've had the opportunity to hear from members of the public, to hear from staff, that might help to inform opportunities for alignment with the strategic plan and with other priorities of council. So certainly an opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation with council itself, but I would see that happening after the Section 26 meeting.
Thank you very kindly.
Are any other questions of council? Not seeing any. I do have a question though, Hannah and Denise. How does it relate to when you do an official plan review? Like there's an election coming. So, I mean, this council is basically going to sit down and have that based on the timeline in which you're looking at, council is going to look at it. And then by the time it gets to, approval, you could have an entirely new council with a whole new thought process. So, I mean, how is an official plan review normally done in the last year of an existing council?
I can take that one. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I can say certainly we have certainly done official plan reviews throughout different terms of council. Typically, the official plan is not an overly contentious document in the sense that we're setting broad directions for commercial development, industrial development. You'll remember the housing friendly workshop we did. Many of the recommendations from that discussion will be integrated within your official plan review. So many of these shifts are not something that change drastically from council to council. There might be specific initiatives within a broader topic such as housing or residential that a certain council wants to take a particular look at, but in my experience, it doesn't range that widely that one council would set a vision which would be ultimately that different from the next council. We're setting the vision for the community into the future, and chances are the vision doesn't change that significantly for the community within a 4-year term. So perfectly appropriate. If the review was to take longer, and let's say it was to go over the time frame and we were sitting with new council, we would certainly take the time to make sure that they felt perfectly comfortable with the direction, review the policy amendments with them, and make sure that it was something they felt comfortable with. No, you're right. Based on the timeline that we've put before you this evening, it would be this council making the recommendation for approval to the county.
Okay, so there is a recommended motion here that, and I will read that motion, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the planner dated January 12th, 2022 regarding the North Huron official plan 5-year review, request to commence review for information purposes. And further, that council agrees to commence a review of Township North Huron official plan under Section 26 of the Planning Act, and that a special meeting of council open to the public be held February 24th, 2022 to discuss revisions to the official plan. Do I have a member of council that wish to move that motion? I've got Councillor Palmer moving, and it looks like I've got Councillor Heffer seconding. I will pass it on to Clerk Lamb for the roll, please.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sight. So Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney? Deputy Reeve-Sight?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you very much, Denise. We will move on to 7.1.3, which is Clerk Lamb's 2022-02 multi-year accessibility plan, the update, and the 2021 status report. I will pass it on to Clerk Lamb.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sight. So not much to add beyond the report. Council is certainly familiar with this process in the update of your multi-year accessibility plan as well as your annual status updates. Both of those documents were attached to the staff report. The document was reviewed by the Legislative Committee and the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee Working Group and was presented to County Council and is now being provided to the lower tier municipalities. The one addition I do want to note is new to this year's plan is Appendix 3, which is the municipal summary. which is to make the plans more prevalent locally. So as you'll note in Appendix 3, municipal staff, we've outlined our local accessibility projects based on complete projects, ongoing projects, and proposed projects. Certainly happy to answer any questions if there are any beyond kind of what I've provided here.
Is there any questions of council to the clerk with regards to this report? I am not seeing any, so I will take a motion that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the clerk dated January 17th, 2022 regarding the multi-year accessibility plan 2022 update and the 2021 annual status report for information purposes. And further, the council approves and adopts a multi-year accessibility plan 2022 update and 2021 annual status report as required under the OADA. And further, the council authorized staff to post the multi-year accessibility plan 2022 update and 2021 annual status report on the Township of North Huron's website as directed in the integrated accessibility standards under the AODA. Do I have a mover of that? I've got Councillor Faulkner moving. I've got Councillor Van Hitterson second. Clerk Lamb, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sipe. So Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson, and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you, clerk. We'll move on to 7.1.4, which is another report by Clerk Lamb in regards to the draft terms of reference for the fundraising committee for the North Huron Museum Relocation Capital Project. I will pass it on to Clerk Lamb for review here to talk to his report.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sipe. So as council's aware, at the November 10th, 2021 special meeting of council, council opted to accept the proposal of the museum committee and directed staff to proceed with next steps in that process. The next step in that process is obviously to establish the terms of reference for the fundraising committee and then to recruit members to that committee. So a draft terms of reference is attached to the staff report for council's consideration, and ultimately this terms of reference document has been developed based on the North Huron committee appointment policy and relevant sections from the procedure bylaw. The report certainly goes in depth to the various features of the terms of reference. However, for the benefit of the public, there are a couple things I just want to note. Ultimately, the mandate of the committee for anyone who may be wishing to apply is that the fundraising committee would be responsible for raising the funds necessary to support the capital and relocation expenditures required to prepare the former train station facility for operation as a North Huron museum. And one of the first things this committee would be tasked with is the development of a fundraising and donorship strategy. So basically, that strategy would explain how the committee plans to coordinate, implement, and evaluate their fundraising activities, and would also explain how the committee will recognize and acknowledge donors to the project, because anyone who's willing to donate to the project, we certainly want to recognize them in a consistent approach. In that document, before any fundraising activities would occur, that document will require council approval. The other thing I want to note is the fundraising goal. So as councilor will be familiar with, in the original proposal, the estimated costs were $338,075 in funds to be raised by any fundraising committee. However, in discussions between both staff and the donor of the building, it was recommended that this amount be increased in order to reflect the increase in materials and construction costs that this council is definitely aware of right now. And the other thing to note is out of that $420,000, the first $20,000 would be earmarked specifically for advertising, mail outs, and promotional initiatives to support the project. The director of finance in his previous work has certainly noted that that is a benefit to any fundraising initiative. And so we just want to incorporate that in there to ensure that no taxation or no tax dollars would go to any portion of the fundraising initiatives. So the rest of the terms of reference notes the composition, the appointment process, remuneration, and township resources. So the director of finance would be the resource to this committee, as well as a recording secretary. But beyond staff resources, no other financial or no other public funds will be provided to the project. I guess the only other thing I do want to note is the term of office of this committee. As council is aware, this is an election year, and committees are automatically required to dissolve at the end of the term of council. So there is always the caveat that the new council could come in and not reappoint the committee should the fundraising goal not be met. So I just want to be very upfront with that in regard to how the processes would occur. At this time, staff are looking for council direction to approve the terms of reference, and then we would start that recruitment process in accordance with our committee appointment policy, and an evaluation of the applications which received would be presented for council's consideration in closed session. The plan is at the first meeting in February so that those appointments can be made and the process can continue on. So I know it's a lengthy document, but certainly happy to answer any questions council may have.
Councillor Palmer, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Carson, what would happen, unless it was in the document and I missed it, what would happen if the committee falls short of their goal, and how would that affect, well, the building moving forward?
In regards to assumption of the building by the township, you mean?
Yes.
So basically, the arrangement would be that no museum operations or township involvement in the building would occur until the funds are raised. So basically, once those funds are raised, then the capital work occurs and the relocation work occurs, and then after that, basically that's when you get into your next steps for determining what operations look like and assumption of the building and what that arrangement looks like.
So the fundraising determines the dates then, okay. For moving forward, okay.
The fundraising, however fast the fundraising goes, will certainly determine how fast basically a museum is in that building.
Very good.
Any other questions or comments by members of council? Okay, not seeing any. So I will take the recommended motion and say that the Council of the Township of North Heron hereby receives the report of the clerk dated January 17th, 2022 regarding a draft terms of reference and for the fundraising committee for the North Heron Museum relocation capital project for information purposes. And further, that council approves the terms of reference for fundraising committee for the North Heron Museum relocation capital project with a goal of $420,000 as presented. And further, that council authorizes the clerk to proceed with the recruitment process of the volunteer committee members in accordance with the requirements of the township's North Huron committee appointment policy. Do I have a mover of that motion? Councillor Heifer moves. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Palmer seconds. Clerk Lamb, roll please.
Thank you, Deputy Reevesite. So Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reevesite?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heifer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey?
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Clerk Lamb. We're going to move on to 7.2, which is the finance reports, 2022-01 asset management plan, and progress updates. I will call upon the Director of Finance to talk to that report, please.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Site. I'm just waiting for the clerk to give me sharing permissions here.
You should be good, Darcy.
All right. I hope everybody can see the screen. When I'm sharing here, I really can't see most of you on my screen. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free just to interrupt me. We'll try and run through this fairly quickly. As important as asset management is, I really just want to get to the update kind of stuff with you. I know you got a fairly packed agenda and still a closed session later on, so I won't waste a whole lot of time. So, why I wanted to make sure I got in front of you with regards to asset management, not only for council's benefit, but also for the broader general public who's going to be listening tonight, talk about why the plan is so important, and of course give council an update on the progress of the current plan that we've got, and then lastly talk about 2022 and moving forward with the plan that we're going to be working on to try and meet the legislation. So the asset management plan is very important in the overall process of how we do business on an annual and long-term basis. Realistically, the strategic plan is the most important document within the township structure. Council's passed an asset management policy overall back in 2019, which dictates the principles and the responsibilities for asset management. What we're now working on is the corporate asset management plan, which will outline objectives, practices, and the asset action plans to make sure that we can improve our assets overall, make sure that we can audit them on an annual basis, and also review our process. And then from there, once a corporate asset management plan has been developed, we'll then develop service area asset management plans that provide levels of service and understands our demands and life cycle activities. And then, what then happens from there is we use those plans on an annual basis to actually develop our annual budgets and guide our activities, both from staff and from a contractor's perspective, in order to provide the services on a daily basis. So the plan is very important because it supports evidence-based business cases for budgets and long-term financial forecasts. So, we'll understand where best to use our money. It will drive longer-term thinking and planning. So, as much as a council is only elected for a 4-year term, the intention behind asset management planning is to look well beyond 4 years. Inevitably, it's going to help us support better financial sustainability to make sure that not only can we can provide services here in North Huron this year and next year, but the services are still going to be sustainable and affordable for the next generation. The plan has to consider the service needs of the community and also manage risk and opportunities. And I think most importantly, the plan will show us how to use our resources wisely. Not only the financial resources that we get every year through the tax levy, but also our human capital resources and what services we're actually going to provide. So, what do people want in our community? Really, all they're looking for is safe and sustainable services in a predictable, cost-effective manner. They want to know that the money that they're putting out every year through their taxes are going to provide the services as cost-effective as they can, and that they're going to be there year over year. So, the reason that we're doing asset management planning is that the province, through Ontario Regulation 588-17, within the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperities Act, said that we had to develop an overall asset management plan. The plan requires a strategic asset management policy, which Council approved in early 2019, We then have to develop our core assets by July 1st of 2022. Now it was actually supposed to be 2021, but because of COVID, everything got pushed off a year. The asset management plan not only needs to include all core assets, but every single asset the municipality owns by July 1st of 2024. From there, we then have to develop proposed levels of service to link the asset that we have with the service that it provides. And then every year thereafter, the finance group, along with all of the senior management team that controls our assets, has to do a council presentation on asset management to kind of provide council with updates on the benchmarks that are set through the plan. So where we're at right now is kind of somewhere, in between the basic and the core of this sliding scale. We do have, an overall asset management strategy. We have a plan that was developed in 2016 prior to the requirements for the legislation. And we've done a lot of work over the last 5 years updating asset data to try and get ourselves to coordinated planning using manual approaches. So not everything's in the database and we're not able to do everything on an automated basis. The intention over the next 2 years is to get us to that point where we're kind of in the intermediate area where we're actually integrating all of our asset management planning exercises with day-to-day activities. So I would say that the staff that you have now, and certainly the treasurer who just recently retired, has done a lot of work over the last 5 years. We certainly have seen a lot of maturity in the data. Water and sewer master plans, building condition assessments, the bridge conditions through the OSIM's fleet replacement program. Jamie just got finished a road and sidewalk assessment. All of those data points are now available for us to include in an asset management plan, which only strengthens our ability to understand the assets and the condition of them. Jamie and Donna went through quite a process as well using BM Ross to do a linear infrastructure matching project to make sure that when we start to map out our infrastructure, we can look at a linear corridor, like so a road. We can click on a road section of Josephine Street and it'll show not only the road, but the storm, the water, the sewer, the sidewalks, and the street lights, so on and so forth. So everything within that corridor can all be shown on one map. There's been a lot of planning maturity happening within the organization. There was a major service delivery review that was completed. The Township of North Huron participated in the AMO Technical Assistance Project as one of the test municipalities. And they also went through the MFOA's Amp It Up project. So you guys have been kind of helping with some of this leading edge type analysis that's been happening. There's also been some internal corporate asset management training that's taken place. And in particular within the public works area, there's been some maintenance management improvements that have been happening where Jamie's group is now doing time task tracking and vehicle maintenance tracking to actually understand more on the operations and maintenance of our assets. So I just mentioned the fact that we do have an asset management plan in place right now. It was done in 2016. That plan showed that North Huron controlled almost $215 million in total assets. And that worked out to almost $100,000 per household in asset value. About half of it is tax supported, and the other half is split between water and sewer. I would say that probably the concerning thing within this 2016 plan is that it did show that there are $24 million of assets beyond their service life. Now, a lot of these assets were looked at in the 2016 plan simply by date. So, if a water main was supposed to have an 80-year life cycle, at the end of 80 years, that meant that it was beyond its service life, and therefore it's included in that $24 million. or a vehicle that was intended to last 10 years, but we were still using it at year 11. So I'm not saying that we're completely $24 million, in the hole with this, but certainly there's work that needs to be done with regards to a number of our assets being at the end of life. So just to provide council with where we're heading, the 2022 asset management plan is being worked on right now to be updated. Citywide was engaged in mid-December to complete a new and updated AMP. Council approved that, I believe it was the December 6th or 7th meeting to enter into a contract with them. It's going to cost about $42,000 to do this work. The plan will include a state of local infrastructure. It'll document the current levels of service that North Huron has. It'll develop an overall asset management strategy and then a financial strategy that goes along with that management strategy. So I think that the one thing that I need to point out to council first of all is that you should expect that this new plan will increase the overall asset value, backlog, and total funding gap. So the $24 million that we saw in 2016, it will get bigger. We are going to have more of a backlog of projects. And that's part and parcel of two reasons. First, because over the last 5 years, we've actually done a great job of better understanding our assets. So the more you understand it, the greater chance there is that you now know all the components and that they may fail earlier, and therefore that increases the overall need. And then secondly, because over the last 5 years, we certainly have not done $24 million of rehabilitation and replacement of our capital assets. So, one of the things that we have to do, over the next number of years is to develop a level of service. So the regulation requires that a current level of service has to be achieved for all of our assets with the updated AMP being completed. So we will document all of our existing level of service for all the different asset classes that we have. That's existing level of service. There is a future expectation, however, though, that we need to understand the community-driven level of service by 2025. So this is not our existing level, but the level that the community is going to demand at the affordability that council is willing to set. So this will develop things such as standard pavement condition indexes for roads, what our winter control standard is, whether we're willing to have service disruptions, hours of operation at our recreation facilities, so on and so forth. And those proposed levels of service need to be established for a 10-year period. The document needs to explain why the proposed level of service is appropriate for North Huron and for its users. And it has to consider maintenance costs and if the budget can support the service. So the intention behind asset management planning moving forward is going to be much like the exercise that we've been doing through the water and sewer side of the budget, where the province wants to see what assets you have, what services being provided by those assets, and how the municipalities, all municipalities in the province, expect to afford that level of service. And if you can't afford that level of service, what are you going to do to change the service expectations? So the role of council in this, of course, is to set the overall strategic direction. It's to establish those levels of service, understanding, what the community wants, and then to allocate the human capital that we have within the organization to set cost recovery targets and to also set tax and user rates. So ultimately, council will have to choose which services we're able to provide and to what degree we're going to provide those services, given the limitations and constraints, especially the financial constraints that we live within. So some of the questions, there's a bunch of questions that we need to ask, and I've got a red box around 2 of them, which I think is vitally important as we move through this. It's really, in particular, going to be the next term of council that will be looking at these future levels of service. So if you're a member of council now that's considering, running in the next term, or if you're a member of the public that's watching tonight who's considering running for council, some of the things that you should be considering, in the lead up to the election, so that you understand what the community really wants, is to ask these questions. Do we have the information we need to ensure that we can continue to provide the services over the long term? Do we know which assets provide these services, what condition they're in, and when they will need to be repaired and replaced? And how much will it cost over the long term to continue providing these things? As a member of council, you need to understand that. And that's why I'm going to continue to keep bringing asset management updates to you so that you can understand that. Because you need to go back to the community and say, which services do we consider are critical? And do we know how we're going to afford those critical services? And that's the real question. So how will asset management planning impact us? I think there's some great positives to asset management planning. First of all, it's not even listed on here, but the intention behind this regulation really is to help get us to a better place, more in line with what the private sector does, to actually do long-term planning to ensure that you can afford the service that you're providing. It'll provide us with a long-term capital plan and a financing strategy. So it's not just going to be one-off annual capital budgets. We'll have a long-term capital plan. It should assist us in obtaining provincial and federal grants, because we'll be able to highlight the plan that we've got, the fact that we really need the services that we're providing, and that we are trying to appropriately fund them, but we still just can't make ends meet. It'll help us to engage the public on the service standards that need to be set between now and July of 2025. And I think one of the biggest things that's going to help is it'll develop performance metrics that we can report annually to the public. So the public will actually know how their dollars are being used for asset management and the services that are being driven by those assets. Of course, for every positive, there's usually an offsetting negative. So on maybe the not so nice side, this of course most likely is going to increase the funding needs annually for both tax and user rate supported budgets to actually afford those assets. And most likely it's also going to strain our project management capacities, maybe even requiring additional staff to deliver on the projects, because right now our staff, in large part, trying to deal with day-to-day operations and a few capital projects every year. And if we have to do more capital work, we're not going to have the time and the human capital to be able to provide that and deliver on those projects. So I think I'd just like council to know that our asset management plan continues to advance. Certainly we're going to have something in front of council by July of this year. I commend all the staff that are here in North Huron, and certainly Donna, who's just recently retired as well. They've done a lot of work to advance the data that we've got, the overall analysis and the service level understanding that we have as an organization. And I really do believe that we are well positioned for meeting the asset management regulations and moving forward with a better understanding of how we're going to provide services to the community.
Thank you very much, Darcy. Is there any questions of council at this point? Not hearing any. So the recommended motion is the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a presentation for the Director of Finance dated January 17th, 2022 regarding the asset management plan and the progress update for information purposes. Do I have a mover? Councillor McBurney moves. Do I have a seconder? I got Councillor Heifer seconding.
So Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we'll move on to 7.2.2, which is again a report from the Director of Finance regarding the borrowing bylaw. Go ahead, Director of Finance.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve. Just kind of a housekeeping project, both this one and the next. There's a requirement for us to pass a borrowing bylaw every year so that we have access to the line of credit through our financial institution. We do this every year because the bylaw is only good for 1 year. I can say that as Donna was heading out, I asked her when the last time was we actually had to use this, and she said it's been probably close to a decade since we even required the short-term funding. We've always had enough cash in the bank, but this is just provides us with an additional safety net if we need it.
Okay, the recommended motion is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated January 17th regarding 2022 borrowing bylaw for information purposes. And further, the Council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw for February 7th regular meeting to adopt the borrowing bylaw. Do I have a mover of that motion? Councillor Faulkner moves. I got Councillor Heffer seconding.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, move on to 7.2.3, which is the interim tax bylaw. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. I will, the recommended motion is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated January 17th regarding the 2022 interim tax levy for information purposes. And further, the Council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw for the February 7th, 2022 regular meeting to adopt the interim tax levy bylaw. Do I have a mover of that motion? Councillor Faulkner moves. Do I have a seconder? Reeve Bailey seconds.
So Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we'll move on to item 7.2.4, which is the report from the Director of Finance regarding the One Funds Investment Program enrollment. I will pass it on to the Director of Finance for that report. Thank you.
Thank you again, Deputy Reeve. So Council, I think you're probably aware that in December you passed an updated investment policy. As part of the passage of that investment policy, you now are able to invest in the One Funds. The next process, of course, is to actually get approval to enroll in the program and go through the necessary applications. And this report will then delegate the authority to myself to actually go through the application process and get us enrolled in the One Funds. The importance of having the ability to invest in the One Funds is that as a small municipality in Ontario, the Municipal Act really allows us only to invest in very secure investments that would otherwise be available from a bank. So what we're really talking about is GICs and bank accounts, savings and checking bank accounts. That's it. So enrolling in the One Funds now allows us to enter into bond and equity markets. The intention behind this is to allow for some of our money that we wouldn't need for in the short term that we're saving for long-term capital projects to actually be invested and hope that the return long term is better through bond and equity markets than, of course, we'd be getting with GICs.
Okay, is there questions or comments from the members of council for the director? Councillor Faulkner, go ahead.
Thank you, through Chair Deputy Reeve. To Darcy, by going in, investing in the one fund and through GICs, is that going to put any time restraints on us to money flowing in and out? Are we going to be going if we had emergencies, something that had to be fixed, and then our money is tied up for a GIC for a year, and we would have to borrow from somewhere else, pay interest, just because we couldn't get at that money, or how is that dealt with?
Great question, through your worship. The one funds, although they recommend, of course, they're different investment vehicles for different timelines. The reality is that we can get the money out literally within 24 hours of making the request. So as long as the request is made by 3 o'clock on any business day, by the end of the next business day, those funds are back in North Huron's bank account. Whereas, to your point, GICs sometimes do have time restraints on them. Now, my past experiences in dealing with the larger banks and credit unions, I've always been able to work out deals on the GICs that, if we really had to get at the money, we would just take a penalty on the interest provisions. So instead of, getting into a GIC at 1.5% on a 2-year term, if we had to break it ahead of time, they may only pay us 0.75% instead of 1.5 or something like that. But I still try and do my best to make sure that all funds are as liquid as possible.
So no penalties on the bond or the market investment?
No penalties at all. No, the only penalty might be is, because again, you're playing with bonds and with stocks here, that the equity is. If we needed the money out and we were in a downturn, like happened, 2 years ago, right after COVID hit, if we were to take the money out, we might be taking it out at a loss. But that's not to say that we still can't get at it if we really need the funds.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Darcy, how are the MERS? Are they sort of outrageous or acceptable?
They're very, very acceptable, and the reason for that is because the one fund portfolio has, I believe, the last time I checked, in excess of $1 billion in total at play. Because everybody from the smallest northern municipality to the city of Toronto has the ability to enter into the one funds, and because of that, the portfolio under management is huge. So the fees that are charged at CIBC Mellon that does the management, they're very, very reasonable.
Good, thanks.
Reeve Bailey.
Thank you kindly. Just a couple of things I'm wondering. For controls, you said you can move them in and out in a hurry. Would every time you have to make a move with any of this money, would it come before council so council has an understanding of where it's moving to? Or would that be held between you and the CAO? Like just curious about controls so that we don't have a population that's going to say no matter what, something came up missing. So I'd like to know about controls.
Certainly, through your worship, actually through the investment policy, there are reporting measures that are required on an annual basis. And not only are there reporting requirements, there are maximum targets that you guys have now set so that only so many dollars, like so much of the overall investment portfolio can be invested in different types of investment vehicles. So, not 100% of the funds could ever make their way into the equity portfolio, and then we lose some money on a downturn, and the total investment portfolio takes a loss. Typically, when it comes to the banking arrangements, when it comes to GICs or even the one funds, the authority lies with the treasurer to make those arrangements with the various banks or institutions. It doesn't have to come to council because, again, rates can change from day to day. But the control mechanism really is that, in doing this, I only have the ability to move the funds from one North Huron account to another North Huron account. So it still stays all within North Huron's overall portfolio. Whereas, as you're aware, if we are making a payment outside of North Huron, like to a third party, there's a check issuance process that has to go through, and we have to have dual signing authorities.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Just looking, I'm just scrolling my screen here to make sure, Rick, nothing from you, nothing from Anita. Okay. Okay, so the recommended motion is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated January 17, 2022 regarding the One Funds Investment Program enrollment for information purposes. And further, the Council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw for February 7th, 2022 regular meeting to enter into an agency agreement between CHUMS Financing Corporation and Local Authority Services as agent and eligible investors with respect to the one investment, and authorize the treasurer to execute the necessary documents from time to time for that purpose. Do I have a mover? I've got Councillor Heifer moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Palmer seconding. Clerk Lamb, for the roll, please.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sipe. Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve-Sipe,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we'll move on to Finance Report 2205, which is the purchasing of goods and services and construction policy. We'll move on to the Director of Finance for that report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sipe. So as promised, again, probably a month or so ago, I was in front of council with regards to environmental purchasing, and I mentioned that a whole new purchasing policy would be coming. This is the new purchasing policy for council to review. Of course, the one main reason that we're having to do this is that we're now posting the majority of our procurement through an open website, and the old purchasing policy didn't actually have the provision to allow us to use a website. So this opens that up and actually makes us compliant with our day-to-day practices. I think the other big thing to note is that page 2 of the report lists 10 other changes that may be of interest to council. I think the biggest thing that I would like to touch on is the increasing of the overall purchasing thresholds and limits, moving from $10,000 to $15,000 for requests for quotations, and then matching that with the emergency purchase thresholds. So that's one thing. The intention of that is just the fact that the costs of goods and services are going up. So we're looking at two parts, moving from $2,500 minimum to a $5,000 minimum to have to go out and get 3 quotes, and then moving from $10,000 to $15,000. So still having a $10,000 range there, but as everybody's well aware, the cost of everything is going up. So for us as staff to have to go through the process of developing specifications and going out and trying to get 3 prices on something that's a $3,000 item, it takes a lot of work, and in a lot of cases vendors aren't even responding because it's not worth the time for them to fill out the paperwork for such a small ticket item. The big thing, of course, also is moving the council approval limit from $30,000 to $75,000. And again, this is one thing the council needs to recognize, is that this is for previously approved budget items. So if it's already in the budget, up to $75,000, and we go out and tender an item, and it falls within that budget, you will be delegating authority to staff to just go out and make that purchase. So the best example that I can come up with is, if we go out and buy one pickup truck, that's we have in the budget at $50,000 and it comes in at $50,000, you're delegating us the approval just to go and actually purchase it and enter into the contract versus having to come to council for that approval. Now, we'll still provide reports to council to make sure that you're aware of all of those items that we've, on a quarterly basis, we would come to council with the delegated approval reports. So you'll still see it. It's not that you won't ever see it. It's just that we now don't have to, come up with a tender award report and go through that whole process, and it take an extra few weeks to get approval for smaller ticket items. So
Darcy,
those are
may I interrupt you?
things. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. This is Anita. Thank you, Deputy Reeve Side. The increasing amount approval for tenders and RFPs for 30 to 75,000. If you were talking about that pickup truck from $50,000. If it comes in at $60,000, you're still going to buy that, or will we see a council report? I think we need a little bit more transparency towards our taxpayers about this policy, because there's a huge increase in this policy for those amounts, like from $30,000 to $75,000, $15,000 to $75. It is already in the budget, but I think it is a very big step to go from the previous amounts to the $75,000.
So sure. So great question, Councillor Van Henderson. So I think, there's two things. So I'll touch first on the $60,000 comment. So if we had $50,000 in the budget, and the low tender came in at $60,000, we would be coming back to council for approval because it's not within budget. Even if it's under $75,000, if we don't have the budget, then we have to come back to council because we have to get approval from council to not only award the tender, but to draw money from some other source to actually make up the difference. And as staff, we don't have that authority to do so. And from a transparency perspective, on these purchases, I'll still be bringing a report forward on a quarterly basis for any of these purchases that occur. So on a quarterly basis, council would still see any of the purchases up to $75,000. You would just see it for information, and so the purchase would be listed, again, for the pickup truck, it would be listed, we had a $50,000 budget. It was awarded to company XYZ for $49,300. So you'd still see it. So there'll still be transparency there. The intention of the $75,000, really, my experience in large part, and fairly true through most of Simcoe and Grey County, is that the delegated authority, rounding up or down, typically comes somewhere around 1% of the total tax levy. And our tax levy is nearing $7 million, which is why I chose $75,000 to get us to that number. So, what you're really saying is that you're delegating authority for a previously approved project up to kind of that 1% of the overall levy. Anything over and above that still has to come to council.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Reeve. To Darcy. I guess, like, if you were going to use the money and we had it in the budget to, you were going to flip trucks, say we didn't agree, say we wanted the money to be used elsewhere. This is, to me, it just opens the doors. Not that you're going to do anything wrong. I understand that. But we may not always agree. That's what I'm getting at. So how do we deal with that?
Through your worship, so just for clarification, I guess, so my expectation would be that if council has approved a budget in year with specific projects, then you've given approval for that. As staff, we are now going to go out through this new purchasing policy, or even through the old one. We're going to develop specification based on that budget and go and procure that item or whatever those items if it's more than one. And the lowest cost based on meeting the standards, we're going to award to. That would be the recommendation of council. So I'm not too sure what, like, has there ever been a time when, a report has come to council for a previously approved item that's already been in the budget, where council did no longer wanted to buy that item to provide the service?
I think a year ago, we had intentions of replacing 2 vehicles. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Replacing 2 vehicles, and we ended up only replacing 1. Because the budget, when you're working on the budget, it starts getting down to a tight point where, what stays, what goes. And maybe something else came up that's more important. And that's where I'm getting at. I still like the idea that we can say yes or no. Like, these vehicles are getting expensive. Like 75,000 won't buy some vehicles now that Works Department would need. So that's where I'm just thinking in those terms. Just what happens in case we changed our mind, because of circumstances. That's all.
So through your worship, I guess, I would ask, like, let's not just think of it as a vehicle. I mean, if we were, having to replace a roof on one of our buildings, or pool equipment, the 2022 budget includes dehumidification systems that have to be replaced at the arena. So the intention would be behind this, of course, that we bring forward, reports to the council but if it's within budget, as staff, we are of the understanding that, we've already justified the need for this expense, and we're going to move forward with procuring it. But I mean, again, I'm new to this municipality. I'm just working within a best practice approach. But if you guys have a need to look at these, then we certainly can review it.
So let me follow up with that comment there, Darcy. So we provide you, there's been a justification through the budget process about capital items and that type of stuff throughout the budget process. It is of the responsibility of staff to follow within that budget. So if for whatever reason staff later in July or August don't think that they're going to need that money because they can't buy it because they need something else, maybe they need that funding, that capital funding, for some other operational purposes and not that truck, then the expectation of council would be that they would be notified of that change. And I think that's not going to change based on what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is, council, from my perspective, unless you have an intimate knowledge of the business, how are you going to know whether we should buy that asset or not buy that asset when you approved the budget in February? How would you know anything different unless staff tell you in August or September? I guess that to me is, I think ultimately it's a conversation of, we're providing them direction with the budget to do something. If it's over and above what we've told them to do, what I'm hearing from Darcy is it's going to come back to council that tells us it's different, either in a report or a notice saying. But I mean, if it's limited at the budget, the 75,000 is just what the number is. It could be budgeted at 10,000 and it's 11,000. Well, they're coming to council to get that extra $1,000. That to me is, I think, I mean, I don't know if that helps you, Councillor Palmer, but that's to me where I think we have to recognize that I don't think, like, the intention is not for staff to have, they only have the limit of what council has given them based on the budget parameters. And I mean, we get quarterly budget reports that tell us, here's what's been spent, here's what's not been spent. So if we got questions, we're going to have those questions at those times during those budget meetings or during those reports that were provided by the director. Questions? Other questions or comments? I'm not hearing any or seeing any. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Director of Finance Chapman, on that report?
I thank you through the chair. I guess just the last thing is to make sure the council is aware that there is a specific inclusion of a clause for tenders and RFPs relating to environmental procurement. So this policy does touch, include that to make sure that, where possible, we're going to be procuring things from an, environmentally friendly manner as we can.
Okay, thank you. So the recommended motion on the report is that the Council of the Township of North Heron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated January 17th, 2022 regarding amendments to the purchasing of goods and services and construction policy for information purposes. And further, that Council hereby approves the purchasing of goods, services, and construction policy as presented. And further, that Council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw for February 7th, 2022 regular meeting to adopt the purchasing of goods, services, and construction policy. Do I have a mover? I've got Councillor Faulkner moving. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Reeve Bailey seconds. Clerk Lamb, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sight. So Councillor Palmer.
You're going to start with me. Well, we'll see how it goes. Okay.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight.
Yes.
Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer. Councillor Van Hittersum.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, so move on to the next report. So this one is report number 2206, which is the financing of Hutton Heights Development Land Servicing. So I will pass it on to the Director of Finance, please.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve again. I hope you're not getting sick of me at this point yet with all these reports. So I think this is a really important report. I know that Council has been kind of wanting to know how this was all going to happen. And I hope I've done my best trying to explain how the project would be financed. I think the first thing that needs to be touched on is the fact that the dollar value, probably not surprisingly, just keeps going up and up. We had about $3.3 million in the development charges background study for this project. At the end of the day, BM Ross has done a lot of work to get us probably close to 90% design at this stage of the game, and it was a total estimated cost of $6.3 million. In reality, we don't fully know at this point how those costs are totally going to be broken down, because it depends on the unit yields that are going to be still being developed between BM Ross with the help of the county, and what properties can be serviced, the potential growth that could happen on each of those parcels of land. But ultimately, I think using the current development charges background study assumptions, taking the approach that about 10% would come from the existing residential units that would be serviced. 10% would be coming from the taxpayers, or potentially, not actually having to come from the tax levy, but would be the offset of the sale of the municipally owned lands would fund that. And then the remaining 80% would be development charges. And with the exception of the municipality's 10% portion, the reality is my expectation, and of course, my experience on the history of these larger servicing projects, is that the majority of this is going to be long-term debt financed. In particular, the development charge portion of $5 billion would be financed over a 25-year period to allow for the development to actually fully build out and to pay those DC charges over time to offset that cost. I won't go further because I'm sure you all have questions, so I'll put it up through the chair.
Questions for the, yes, Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Darcy, now those numbers are just are calculated just on the Hutton Heights development itself. They're not taking into consideration 5-10 years down the road with that portion of development getting developed in other areas out there. Like you're just pinning all that on just the one section of 30 acres, but it has the potential of servicing 100 more if those things come to fruition. So really it's a large number, but right now it's only being calculated on just the Hutton Heights portion of that we control.
Through the chair, no, it's the entire Hutton Heights service area. So it includes not only the municipality's lands, but also the privately held lands that have development potential as well. And that's why at this stage of the game, we're having to do, work with BM Ross and with the county to try and understand what the unit yields would be on all the lands, to then understand, I think, we're doing work internally with BM Ross about, how the North Huron controlled lands could be developed. So we kind of have a pretty good idea of what the unit yield would be on that parcel, but it's what units are available on the other outlying lands, and then adding that all up with our controlled land plus all the residential units, and then the cost gets divided by all of that. And that's why the recommendation is in so many different parts the way it is. The first thing, of course, being to go out and start the process with Infrastructure Ontario to actually get financing, and to go through that approval process. And then my experience, I've done this a couple times where, one servicing project that we had impacted about 600 existing residential units. So the best course of action is to go through the process of developing a local improvement bylaw right now, like within the next few months, and start the public process on that. Leave the costs kind of as, a bit of a question mark right now. Like we generally know what the development charge is right now. That's the best that we can go with. But the intention behind this then is that as soon as the local improvement bylaw gets passed through council, we'll update the cost at a later date once the project gets finalized. But that local improvement bylaw then gets registered in the tax file on each of those properties. So if the property changes hands, then it's known to the new purchaser and the existing purchaser that there is going to be an upcoming charge. Because that's one thing that I've learned from experience that didn't happen, that caused us a lot of headache in a foreign municipality. And then, of course, the last thing is, once we actually get through the award of tender, to get BM Ross to open up the development charges background study again, because then we'll know the actual cost from the tender. Plus, we'll by that time have a good understanding of what the unit yields are, and then redo that calculation and redo everything so that we have a new number, so that development that's going to happen out there has an eyes wide open understanding of what the costs are.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Reeve. Yeah, we have to remind ourselves that these dollars only take the water sewer to the doorsteps of the different owners west of the church, and to even our 28 acres. It just goes to the doorstep, and then whoever buys bits, the whole parcel or bits and pieces, they have to pay for getting it to their each of the lots, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct, yes.
Yeah.
This just deals with servicing on the municipal right-of-ways and road allowances.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reeve Bailey.
Thank you very kindly. This is one we've all pushed really hard on. This is one that's taken, well, for me, it's been quite an education because I thought we'd have this done the first year we were on council. But this is the beginning of the growth we need in all of North Huron to be able to stabilize our taxes and continue to be a community of communities. We have to take this step. I believe we have to take this step. I believe we've come a long way. I'm hoping council agrees with me that even though this may be in the next session of council, it is a payback. This is a payback. As Councillor Palmer said, the end user still has to pay. This eventually goes back into our bank account and nets out at a zero cost for the existing taxpayers of North Huron. We're borrowing the money now, but every time somebody builds, we're paying that. They are paying that money off, not the taxpayers of North Huron. And that's been the hardest thing to seem to be delivered to deliver in this whole scenario. It is a payback. It's a long-term payback, but North Huron is going to be here a long time. So I am really excited about getting this through and moving on this. And we've got some builders that were pretty excited along with us. So I just want to thank council for being patient for 3 years, working hard in this, and I hope we do pass this tonight. Thank you.
So I have just one question to you, Darcy, is so if you do this through Infrastructure Ontario or any of these things, there is a penalty provision. Obviously, these are locked in rates. You can't pay it out. Like, I mean, there's, is that correct? You can't pay it out if like, obviously, if this is a run over 25 years, if you develop this thing in 10, you're still going to have payments for 15 years on that growth. Yes, you're getting taxes and all that other stuff accordingly, but these loans are locked in for that period. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, you are correct. They are locked in. I mean, you can get out of them, but there is a hefty penalty. It's effectively like, it's actually probably a little bit worse than the penalty that you would pay on a mortgage to break the mortgage. So you're going to be paying the interest anyways. The expectation, let's say, in reality, I've looked at this and said, if we had 250 total units out there, and I don't know if we're going to, but if we have 250 total units, what we're talking about is an average of 10 per year getting built. What's probably going to happen is, the first few years, somebody's going to go in there because of the pent-up demand and they're going to go gangbusters. And we might have 40 or 50 units in the first couple of years. And then, you're going to have some ebbs and flows. But ultimately, let's say everything does get built out in 10 years. And, we still have 15 years left on the payback. We also have to recognize that we have every single dollar of that development charge already captured. It's sitting in our bank. We can go and invest it in the one funds, right? And as long as we're making the same amount back on the interest of what we're paying long term, then it's still all a wash. And even more importantly is there's an expectation when we get through the update to the DC background study. The current study doesn't include any debt repayment charges, like the interest on debt, because at the time nobody knew how it was going to be paid for. When we update the DC background study, there is going to be a financing charge built into the overall development charge as well, to understand that we're going to have to pay interest over a long period of time. So the development community is going to pay for that as well. So there is no risk whatsoever I can't say there's no risk. We could service it and it not develop, but I think there's such a pent up demand for housing, not just locally, but across the province that, we're not going to have an issue getting our money back.
Thank you very much. I want to completely agree with everything you just said. So I want to thank you very much for that. Is there any other questions or comments, Councillor Heffer? You're on mute, Paul. Sorry, you're on mute.
So, sorry, through you, Deputy Reeve, to Darcy now, just in case things just started to slow down, does BM Ross feel that we're going to be able to move enough in the first, 3 years that we're going to feel safe, that just for our taxpayers' confidence in us making this decision? Are you getting feedback from BM Ross? It's going to slide forward well.
You're on mute, Darcy.
Through the chair, I think that the construction of this will be done certainly by the end of next year, and then hopefully we have some development internal servicing concurrently happening. I think things are going to move really quick. I mean, I certainly don't think that BM Ross is of the opinion that we're going to be doing this and it's going to sit there fully serviced but vacant for a long period of time. I know that there have been, a number of people that have already contacted the CAO, speaking with Dwayne about development potential and opportunities, and there are people certainly interested, at least in North Huron's controlled lands. So I don't think there's going to be an issue. I mean, the best example of whether we think this is going to move quick or not is Blythe. I mean, we've got an example within our own municipal boundary. Somebody went out there, they developed some new units, and my understanding is that the majority of them were sold before the first one was even finished because there's such demand. So I don't think we're going to have to wait to start getting our money back.
Anybody else? Have any comments, questions? Seeing any? Okay, so I've got a recommended motion here that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated January 17th, 2022 regarding financing of the Hutton Heights development land servicing for information purposes. And further, that Council directs staff to initiate the application process with Infrastructure Ontario to secure both short-term construction financing and long-term debt for a maximum of 25-year term to be funded from the collection of development charges and local improvement charges upon completion of the project. And further, that Council directs staff to develop necessary local improvements bylaws outlining the total cost per property, listing all affected properties and including flexible payment options for consideration at a future public meeting. And further, that Council directs staff to engage BM Ross and Associates Limited upon the successful award of construction tender to complete an addendum to the development charges background study to include updated tender prices and finalized growth projections for the provision of road, stormwater, water, and wastewater services encompassing the proposed development and existing residential lands within the Huron Heights service area. I don't think it could be any longer. Do I have a mover? Reeve Bailey moves. Councillor Van Hittersum seconds. I did have one other question as I was reading that motion, Darcy, that I thought I want. When you talk about these improvement bylaws outlining the total cost per property, we're only talking about the costs associated to the
External.
Yeah, the stuff that is connected to the water service. So for example, when I talk about this is that, there's people on Crawford right now that aren't connected. And we haven't, and there's been no discussion at this point as to forcing them to connect or whatever the case may be. So that's not in that discussion. Is that correct? This is just all the development, the non-developed pieces of the property. Is that correct?
Through the chair, no. So local improvement bylaws talk, those are for the existing residential units. So, but the cost of that would just get the service. Probably the best way to explain it is the curb stop, right? So it gets the service to that curb stop, to the property edge, and that's it. And it's the cost to the existing residential units to get the service to their property line, but not into their house.
Right, but this bylaw or this whatever is not indicating that we are forcing them to connect or any of that perspective at this particular point. Is that correct?
That's correct. They'll have to pay their proportionate share of the service, but the local improvement bylaw will not speak to the fact that they have to connect.
But I mean, if they wanted to connect, this improvement bylaw would indicate here's your proportionate share of the connection to do what you need. That is what I'm hearing?
Well, through the chair. So, I mean, if we use the numbers that are in the report or in the background study at $13,000 for water and sewer, what it really means is that those existing houses that are on Crawford will have to pay $13,000, whether they hook into the system or not. They'll have to pay it. What we're saying is this bylaw will not force them to hook into the system and then have to start paying monthly fees. It will give them the service provision, but it doesn't speak to the fact that they have to pay for like monthly water and sewer charges.
But it indicates that they're going to have to pay $13,500.
That is correct.
Okay, Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's new for me too. We always talked about that there would be no commitment for the people on Crawford Road to connect to the service, or not to connect, but to have to pay for the water going by their house. I think that's is that a normal fee people have to pay if you put water in there?
So through the chair, it is absolutely a normal cost, and I guess there really are two options that council has in this regard. The one that's been laid out in the report, where we go through a local improvement bylaw, or whatever the apportioned cost is to the existing residential units, the tax base will have to pay that. So, it can't come from developers. We cannot charge the developers for all that and give the existing residential units a free pass. The Development Charges Act doesn't allow us to do that. We have to calculate benefit to existing. So the only option that we have is to either charge that individual unit for that because they're getting that opportunity, or all taxpayers within North Huron would have to pay that through the tax levy.
Reeve Bailey.
Thank you very kindly. So my understanding all along was no, they would have the ability to hook up, and when they hooked up, then they would pay that charge, just like the internal workings that will go on for other parts of the community, because they're on their own septic tanks. So that's what we preached all along to the public. That's what we said we do. And my understanding all along was they don't pay a penny because they've got their own water and sewer now, but the day they hook in, they have to pay those fees. Is there anybody from Burnside, whoever it is, to just comment on that? Because that's the way I sold it, and that's the way I've understood it. I did not catch that. Thank you very much, Deputy Site, for catching that. That's what we sold as a council. It was a big hurdle for us to get that done.
Through the chair, I guess I could say, there isn't anybody here from BM Ross, but I guess I could say that, as part of the, because again, the local improvement bylaw will have to come to council first so that you understand it anyways. I guess if council wanted to make the provision that they didn't have to pay immediately, then we could do so. But in that regard, what then happens is they're going to have to pay whatever the charge is at the time that they actually do connect.
Yes.
Right. And what happens though is that charge escalates every year with, so whatever the new development charge is, it's calculated if it's 5 years from now. And like this year's development charge went up by 7%.
Yep.
So whatever that charge is at that time, because again, what it means is that we're holding the debt without getting any payment, right? So typically what I've done in the past is develop a local improvement bylaw that provides the ability for ratepayers to finance it at a very favorable interest rate over an extended period of time and pay it with their taxes on an annual basis. So it takes the sting out of the one-time fee. But then it's done and it's paid for, so that doesn't get transferred on to the next owner, because ultimately what happens if they sell that property and there is this $13,000 charge, a new property owner through their lawyer is going to do a title search and see that that's sitting there as part of the process. It's just going to reduce the value of the offer by the $13,000 anyways. At least that's what's happened in literally hundreds of occasions in the past, and with my experience.
Yeah, that was my understanding of how we were going to work this out in the very beginning. Is so yes, if somebody buys that house and they sell it, then they have to let that person know that if they want to hook in, they can, and it's X amount of money to hook in. Absolutely. That's the only conversations I've ever had. I have not had conversations. I have had conversations about, no, you do not have to pay up front because you're not hooking up. So Darcy, I don't know how can we work that out. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Deputy.
What I'm hearing though is that if that improvement bylaw comes in, there can be exemptions to that bylaw that indicates this proposal that has been normally talked about.
Yeah.
Concern is exactly that. Is I want the decisions to, in my opinion, I want the decisions left to the point of the property owner, in the sense that if you want to take the risk that the development charges is not going to be higher in 5 or 6 years as it relates to that thing, then you make the call. But when you connect, it is going to cost you something.
Yep.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, you could get a charge for $13,500 today and connect, or you can take the risk and in 5 years or 7 years or 8 years connect, and it's $35,000. You have to make that risk. I mean, but then the financial decision is made by them, as opposed to us forcing them to do something that they don't necessarily want to do. And to me, then that is really going against really what we had hoped and to do for that stuff for Crawford Street. Because I mean, there's people out there that just do not want it. And I mean, that's the part for us, is that we need to recognize that they don't want it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll go to Councillor Van Harrison first, and then I'll go back to Reeve Bailey.
Yes, I find it a little bit unfortunate that we have to go with the water through Crawford. There's no other way to get to that Hutton Heights property. So we're forcing them more or less to pay that $13,000, and I have a little bit trouble with that. Yeah.
So we actually, sorry, can I?
Go ahead, Reeve Bailey.
So we have people out there that just put a septic in 2 years ago. They're not going to hook up. They don't, obviously, we have people out there that put a new well in. They're not going to hook up. Why? Because they spent their money. It would not be fair to them to tell them they have to spend it now. But they do know that at any time in the future, they can hook up to it. So if somebody has a septic go bad, my son just put one in, it was $12,000. He doesn't live out there. It's a cottage way up north, so it's nothing to do with my family, but it's $12,000 for that septic. He could have said, I'll just take the street and I'm done with it. I'll never have to clean it or worry about it again. And that's kind of what I thought we were offering these folks. And it sounds like, unless it goes south on me, that's what we've agreed to. And there's going to be, Darcy's bringing something back. We'll put that in writing and clarify that. That's all I wanted to say. Okay.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Deputy Reeve, just considering those people there, that some people have just gotten it, but I'm sure there's some that might be at the other end of the totem pole will they get a good deal on the money end of it if they take it over, let's say, take it over 10 years, Darcy, or something like that? Would that option be able to be slid in there or not?
Yes, so through the chair, I mean, right now, we're able to get, 10-year term financing locked in for the whole 10 years at 2.51%. That's that was the current rate as of a week ago. So that's what we would, whatever we have to borrow the money for, that would be my recommendation, that's what we then offer to the residents out in that area. It's not like we would tack on an extra fee on top of that or anything. So, it's maybe not, the 1.7% that you can get from your bank right now, but again, that's usually only for a couple of year locked in mortgage. This would be for the entire 10 years.
And then,
Thank you.
and correct me if I'm wrong, Darcy, but this conversation is really going to fully come back when you talk about the local improvement bylaw. That is correct?
Absolutely correct, Deputy Reeve. Yeah, we'll have a map outlining everything. It'll list the roll numbers of every one of the properties. The intention would be, at least in the past, the way I've done this is the bylaw comes forward for council consideration just as a preliminary draft. If you're satisfied with it, then we actually send out individual notices to every one of those properties that are listed and provide them with a copy of the bylaw and establish, set up a public meeting with all of those folks that are affected plus council to hear what their concerns are and then run through the process.
Okay. Councillor Faulkner?
Yes, through you, W. Is it possible for me to put forward an amendment to the motion of just incorporating the first part of agreeing to the report from the director for information purposes, and to direct for the application process for Infrastructure Canada to secure the loan in the 25 years, and then direct staff to engage BM Ross Associates upon the successful award of the construction tender to complete an addendum to the development charges background study that includes the updated tender prices and finalized growth projections for the provision of water and sewer and servicing encompassing the proposed development and existing residential lands within the Heron Heights. So to bring it back so that we're taking out that portion that we're already making directing staff to make out the bylaw to make flexible portions of payment just to get to go through.
So if I may, through yourself, Deputy Reeve, so that portion you would be taking out is the portion directing staff to basically start drafting a bylaw. It's not saying council would be adopting a local improvements charge bylaw, but basically it's directing Darcy to investigate that bylaw to provide those flexible payment options, whether that's payment at the time of connection or what that looks like. But basically it's not setting anything in stone saying you need to connect as soon as we run it to your property line. So if you want to have that conversation, which it sounded like council does want to have that conversation at a later date here, you would certainly want to leave that in the motion as is, and you wouldn't be committing to any adoption of a local improvements charge, just for one to be drafted for council's consideration.
Yep. So I think we want to. I think we want to have the bylaw. The question is whether or not it's going to have these other provisions in it that staff's provisions, thoughts, process might be different than what council's perspective is. So, I mean, at that time, then council can have a realistic approach to it. Obviously, we can have that conversation at that time, send back any provisions or changes we want to potentially make, and then have a fulsome discussion during a public meeting. Because again, it's all going to have to be dealt through a public meeting in the process, in my mind. Reeve Bailey?
And just to add to that, I'm pretty sure staff have just heard the conversation and they understand the direction council would like to go in. So when they bring that back, it's not going to be in our face the wrong way. I see Darcy acknowledging the fact, yes, he's heard counsel.
So Clerk Lamb, I believe we do have a mover and seconder, because I started that long, lengthy discussion after the fact, just to make sure I understood. But I mean, feel free to correct me.
That's correct. And you've already read through that lengthy motion there, so I won't make you do it again. So if there's any other questions for council, but if not, I'll call a recorded vote here. So not hearing any. So Deputy Reeve-Sype?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate the Director of Finance taking a lot of those questions and comments. So thank council as well. So I'll move on to the 2022 the Director of Public Works and the appointment of additional building inspector report. Jamie, can you please talk to this report, please?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sype. So the report I'm presenting today is in order to provide additional building inspection services for the Township of North Huron. Staff reached out to David Kopp. He is the chief building official who's part-time at the Township of Howick. And he has agreed to perform building inspection services for the Township of North Huron. He is geographically a lot closer and has a familiarity with some of the developers and builders in the Township of North Huron. He has agreed to assist us, and his costs are outlined in the report. He's got his own insurance, and he would be like a contractor working for the Township of North Huron. So he wouldn't be working on behalf of, it wouldn't be like a shared service arrangement similar to what occurred with Morris Turnberry. It would be him contracting himself out to the Township of North Huron. And I'm here for any questions.
Councillor Palmer, and then I'll go to Councillor Heffer.
It's nice having somebody close like that, but I'm just wondering what the who has priority. Like if the builder calls in because he needs an inspection, who's he call, and who gets first? So like what gets me is if it ends up being down in Kitchener, that's who they end up calling. Well, we'll be paying from the second they jump in their vehicle till they get here and home again, where David Kopp would be the obvious choice. So can we use something that makes more sense, the logical way of doing things? Or like, who's going to set that up? It becomes an issue if it was just what I just explained.
Yes, possibly. Through Deputy Reeve-Sype to Councillor Palmer. Actually, I've been corresponding a lot with both David Kopp and Gerald Moore, who is with RSM, and depending on what the building permit is and who's able to get to the inspection quicker, that too is dispatched from the township.
Okay. Better.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes, that pretty well answers it. I was just hoping that Dave would be the primary one, and I'm just happy to hear that he knows the contractors. I appreciate that part of it. Thank you very much.
He's been great.
Yeah, great.
Councillor Van Hittersum.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Reeve-Sype. Jamie, this is just a temporary measure or not till we have our own officials. So hopefully somebody will come soon, and then everything is behind us. Then everything will be regular again.
Through Deputy Reeves' site to Councillor Van Hittersum, the job ad is still out and it's been posted on more of the building official websites that they go for job postings. So we are hopeful that somebody that fits within the township will apply. But for the interim, David Kopp is very knowledgeable. He's very familiar with the area and is able to assist us just temporarily. I believe he still prefers his position.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions of council as it relates to that report? Not seeing any. So the recommended motion is that the Council of the Township of North Heron hereby receives a report prepared by the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated January 17, 2022 regarding the appointment of an additional building inspector for information purposes. And further, that Council repeal bylaw number 96, 2021 and replace it with bylaw number 5, 2022. And further, that Council appoints David Klopp, Rick Block, Mike McKean, and John Darehort as building inspectors for the Township of North Heron effective January 1st, 2022. Do I have a mover of that motion? I've got Councillor Heffer moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Van Hittersum seconds. Clerk Lamb?
Thank you, Deputy Reeves. Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer? Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeves Site?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you, Council. We'll move on to the CAO's report, 2022-01, Community Engagement Coordinator. I will pass that on to Dwayne to talk to his report. Dwayne.
Thanks, Deputy Reeves. So the Recreation Clerical and Marketing Assistant position is a position that we currently have within the Recreation Community Services Department. And that position provides administrative and marketing support functions for the Recreation Department, as well as provides oversight of special events in the municipality. The position also provides administrative support for the Director of Recreation Community Services. Due to a shift in municipal demands and priorities, the scope of the position has evolved, and the existing duties and responsibilities are better defined and best described as a community engagement coordinator. So community engagement coordinator job description has been attached to the report for Council's review and consideration. And staff are seeking Council's permission essentially to eliminate the Township's Recreation Clerical and Marketing Assistant position in favor of a Community Engagement Coordinator. So as per the attached job description, the Community Engagement Coordinator focuses on many facets beyond recreation and will assist many departments. The Community Engagement Coordinator would provide a holistic approach to internal and external clients on community initiatives, and would also work collaboratively on community-led events and initiatives, and provide program initiatives under the guidance of the Economic Development Officer, if final approval of that position is granted, as well as any economic development strategic plan that would be approved by Council. Given the recent indication of Council's future plans for economic development services, staff feel that the restructuring of the position is appropriate at this time. The municipality, through the restructuring, will be able to provide a coordinated approach to community-led initiatives, including marketing and branding, promotion, and coordination between local groups and organizations. Because the community economic development position focuses on many economic development facets beyond recreation, The community engagement coordinator will report to the CAO until such time as council has made a final decision regarding the economic development officer position. If council grants final approval for an economic development officer position, it's recommended that the reporting structure for the community engagement coordinator shift to the economic development officer. A draft economic development officer job description will be presented for council review and consideration after council has made a final decision regarding that particular position. The Recreation Clerical Marketing Assistant provides administrative services to the Director of Recreation Community Services. In addition to the Recreation Clerical Marketing Assistant, we have a couple of other individuals or staff within that department that assist with administrative functions. So if the proposed change is approved, the CAO will work with the Director of Recreation Community Services to look at transitioning the recreation-specific administrative services from the Recreation Clerical Marketing Assistant to other administrative staff. But it's expected that a significant portion of the existing duties and responsibilities of the incumbent will transition in the community engagement coordinator position. And it's also recommended that the incumbent recreation clerical marketing assistant assume the duties and responsibilities of the community engagement coordinator. Based on a review of our pay grid and other similar positions, it is expected that there will be some adjustment to the position. The position is currently in band 5 on our pay grid, and it's expected that there would be an adjustment to band 6, and the expected cost increase to the 2022 budget be approximately $6,000 if council was to approve. So we'll take any questions.
Councillor Faulkner?
Thank you, through you, Deputy Reeve. I have to say, on all the time that I've been on, 3 years I've been on council, that seldom has a report come through that ticks all the boxes. From the representation that I get, or I hear from the volunteer organizations and from the economic development boards and the BIA boards, I finally see this as being a huge step forward in pulling all those assets into one spot, and to alleviating a lot of the complaints that I have received in bringing that into this one position. I felt heart swelled when I saw this, just because it just ticks so many boxes. Just for me personally, in the involvement in the organizations that I represent and sit on their boards, everything from the markets to stuff that we as a council and as staff have just been. There's just been too many moving parts to move things through quickly that really didn't need to come to council, and putting this into a position where they have the authority to take it directly to staff in a timely basis. I just see nothing but good feelings for this one. So I wholeheartedly put my support behind this one. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from staff? Or sorry, not staff, council. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve. I guess my feelings were different from Councillor Faulkner, but I guess I'll be positive at first. I think changing the duties of the recreation clerical marketing assistant job is a good idea, and it'd be masked as the community one. I think that's good. I think the person that's responsible for the said job at the rec department is wonderful. That person does a really good job and could easily take on these extra duties, and it'd be good for our municipality. I think that's where it ends. When reading the job description, I'm first line, Manager of Economic Development, Marketing and Tourism. Who's that? Is this a new position that's in someone that I don't know this person? Okay, maybe answer that before I carry on, Dwayne, if you would.
Sure, through your chair. So the position, so that was unfortunately an earlier version in terms of that report to title. So it should have said CAO.
Because my blood pressure went really high when I saw that, especially when it's mentioned 10 times. So I'm really glad that it's a typo.
Yes,
Typo?
it should not have, and I apologize for the error. I'm not sure how that got onto the council agenda, but that there was different versions of the job description that were being developed, but the final version that unfortunately you didn't see. So wherever you see that in the job description, that is to say CAO. So my apologies for that.
Now I'm feeling a little bit better.
Yeah,
but
sorry, my apologies.
I would like to ask Vicky though, how she feels that this move or change would affect the rec department, and would shifting her staff around to kind of fill this void, would it work? I think that's what we all need to know. Hoping she's on.
I am here. Just took me a minute there to get everything kind of turned on. I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I guess in terms of the department, I feel that the reporting relationship will have a negative effect on the department, if I can be honest. The department, we work together. Because of the nature of the recreation department and community services and things, there's a lot of communications that has to occur. And we have a lot of involvement with the different community groups and things that, not just from a special event standpoint, but just in terms of working with them, whether it's, Friends of the Village, or it's the Horticultural Society, or groups like that. We do work with them on different initiatives that are not special events. Where that's going to fall, I'm not really sure at this point. And I'm really concerned about that because that position definitely keeps us in the loop as to everything that the groups are, that's going on with the groups. The position, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that it's not a new position. It's that the job description has become outdated. The staff member has been performing these responsibilities for more than 3 years now without any acknowledgement or compensation. We were just kind of waiting for things to settle in terms of the department's roles and responsibilities, because we had a lot of things that were kind of in flux with the transition of the parks over to public works and facilities over to public works, and then there was the museum and things like that. We have been struggling definitely since parks moved, and this position does play a key role in fostering that relationship with the public works department, and ourselves with the community groups, our public works with the community groups. For me personally, I'll no longer have an assistant. you know, the marketing assistant position, it's not like the change here is that that person will no longer be assisting me with, you know, my projects, the tendering, the funding applications, doing research, drafting reports. The position looks after all of our design and printing and distribution of flyers, brochures, posters, our web pages, social media accounts, our voice ads on the radio. It's a crucial position for our department. I'm worried that basically the reporting relationship, because it's not just the reporting relationship, but it's also the location change, that the roles and responsibilities of the position will change to focus more on the economic development and the business community and priorities of the township as a whole, and there'll be less time spent on promoting recreation and supporting the user groups. I think that's probably my biggest concerns, that there's going to be less time to do all those things, because this position is a very full position and has become overstretched at times and things, and particularly now with, you know, COVID and the need to rebuild our programming and our clientele, and the advertising promotion that's going to need to occur. I'm just worried that other priorities are going to take over, and I'm not sure. Like, she definitely has the person, definitely has the skill sets to assist me with those tasks and things. So, you know, I mean, quite often I hear from staff about the workload and things, so I'm not really sure how they're going to take on some of these things, some of these tasks. But my biggest, I think my concern is that there's going to be further issues with the department staying connected with town hall and the community and whatnot. That would be my concerns.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
I'll just in terms of with the marketing and promotion, that's really what the position is geared towards in that respect, and certainly, you know, it would continue to provide service to the recreation department. It's not that there'd be no more service to the recreation department. It would service the position as is proposed, would service all departments. So just to assist in that understanding.
I have a question.
Councillor Faulkner?
Yeah, through you, Reeve, to Dwayne. So then you're saying that this position would not report to you, or will report to you? So you're saying that she'll report to she'll initially have 2 senior bosses instead of 1, or how does that work?
No, through you, chairs, to Councillor Faulkner. So right now the position provides service solely, for the most part, to the recreation department. The administration, so the proposal is that the position would move into the administration department, and the administration department provides services to all the departments. So myself, Darcy, Carson, for example, and so the proposal is that the position will provide service to, so use a website as an example, in terms of the website provides services to the entire municipality, and so that would remain under the position, but in terms of it would provide service, you know, to all the departments under the administration umbrella. But also, and again, subject to, depending on where council goes with the economic development officer position, working with the economic development officer in terms of things like marketing, branding, and promoting the municipality. So did I answer the question, or?
Yep. Yep.
there any other questions or comments to the Councillor Heifer?
Through you, Deputy Reeve. Is there any chance when I hear what Dwayne just said there, is there any chance that maybe there could be that one day a week that working through the rec centers or something like that, that there's a portion, because I see the other people, Darcy and Carson, the clerk's department, they're going to be getting a hold, if understood right, the explanation there from that this lady or who I presume it is, could be helping out still help out a bit down in the rec part for things. Like, if I understood that right, that would still be happening.
Which I'm not sure I quite understand,
Well,
Councillor. Sorry. In
Councillor
terms
Heifer,
of,
let me think if I can kind of summarize it. So CAO has indicated that they're not, recreation is not potentially losing anything from that individual. That's what the CAO is intending, is that person is going to be doing work for both recreation and facilities, but also for the municipality as a whole. So, I mean, arguably, I think the concern from the director of rec is that time going to be sufficient than what we have currently today? I mean, that's arguably, there's a lot of connection there in the past of what I'm hearing from the director of rec. So, but what I'm hearing from the CEO is they're going to still be doing the majority of what they were doing before, just not in the same location. And there's a concern of a disconnection from a rec perspective about communication. I think is what I'm hearing from that. But have I clarified for you a little bit what I heard?
Yeah, like I just want to make sure that there's still something going on there, so that's good.
Am I correct in my assumption there, Dwayne? Is that the intent?
yeah, certainly service would continue with the recreation department. It's like, yeah, but in terms of marketing, branding, and all those sort of functions, it would be the recreation specific that we would need to do some looking at things in terms of, you know, and again, it kind of goes back to, you know, in terms of looking at, you know, modernization and moving things forward in that respect.
Councillor Van Henderson.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Saib. I am really concerned if I hear Vicky speaking, it is like she really can't miss this person. Then she's moving to a different location. We don't have an economic development officer yet. There's no decision made about that. It looks like this person is going to help to assist the economic development officer as well. So I would like to see this motion deferred to until we have an economic development officer, and find a new, or not a new job description, but make this job description there. And then maybe we have to look at the rec department and see if there's somebody else who can take over parts of this job, what this person did for the rec department, and go from there. I have trouble with this community engagement coordinator. I think she can do a fantastic job in what we're asking her to do, or him, or who it is. But what I'm hearing from Vicky is that she is really needing somebody else there then, because there's work for her to do.
Robert, do you see my hand?
I don't, Reeve, sorry.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Well, no, if Anita's done, I'd like to speak.
Go ahead, Reeve.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm quite disappointed to hear what Vicky had to say, to be quite honest with you. She knows damn well she's not losing this person. The person's still going to continue to do the job she's doing now. We're going to add it to, we're going to add to the job, and that's why the job description is changing. When we put our website together and this person put that website together and spent all that time, it was not for just recreation. It was for the entire town. When I say town, I mean Blythe, East Wawanosh, and Wingham. It wasn't for a little building down in Wingham. We're going to promote this person up. We're going to make our town better. We're going to promote all of our town, and we all work together. I'm a little disappointed in what I heard. Maybe it's time we should actually, from what Vicky said, maybe it's time that the council should look into having somebody come in and just go through the staff and see who's doing what and what's doing who. Because this person started on as part-time, went to full-time. She's done all this work for stuff that is not for recreation specifically only. The most amazing thing is it is for, when we put our new site together on the computer, it is for all of North Huron. So I'm a little disappointed, to say the least. I want to move this town forward. We all do. This move is a good move. It will work for all of us, and you will see how it will benefit us. I think I'll let it go right there. Thank you.
Reeve, I will make some comment. I think we have to recognize that this individual is an important factor to the recreation department. That's what I'm hearing from the director of recreation. So I think what I've also heard is that there needs to be some further understanding about what can be moved and what cannot be, and that's going to be a discussion between the CAO and administration and the director of finance. Or director of recreation. I don't think just to say this individual is going to do it or not do it without really having clear understanding of what needs to be done and really how this communication is going to factor. To me, I think, this is a conversation about I completely agree. We want to grow, make this a more, we talked about this as a council as to making it more about how do we promote our assets in the municipality, all of them. And arguably for me, it's how do we communicate out rather than in. And arguably from my perspective is a lot of this it seems to be more integration of the departments than not. And I think we have to recognize that there is always going to be an angst when change could occur. And I'm not going to say that I don't disagree. It's a change. It's a change. But we have to recognize we had a community engagement coordinator before. In essence, this is not a new position. In reality, that's what we had before. When it was an economic development officer. So I think we have to recognize. As council, in theory, do we believe that this is the right approach? At the end of the day, it is up to Dwayne and the senior management team to make this work if we seem to think that this is an important thing to go. It is not council's responsibility to make this work. It's not our responsibility. It's Dwayne's responsibility, in my mind. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve. Yeah, I'm concerned about putting my when I put my wholehearted congratulations on this, and then to hear the basically the dissension from between management staff. That it's a recommendation by the CIO, which is pretty much the head of senior management staff, and having a direct rebuttal from other senior management staff wanting to control the narrative of someone trying to do something to correct a problem that we have. If we don't want to correct the problem, that's fine. then obviously we don't, there's one position there that we don't need, because we're taking two people to run run the ship here. Either we have a senior management or the head of senior management. If their recommendations aren't being thought as being progressive or acceptable, that means that either they didn't have a conversation amongst the senior management staff to get behind this amendment to come towards council, puts council in the middle of an argument between an employer and their employee. I'm in the same boat as the REVA. This was an opportunity to restructure people within the staff to cover some problems we have. I encourage the rest of the council to get more involved with the volunteers and listen to them, what the organizations are saying when they're coming to get something to go through to get to council and they're not getting through. This would just help broaden their approach to council. So I'm kind of confused here. If we're not going to accept a recommendation by the CAO, then we're pretty much dead in the water as a council.
Deputy Reeve Sype, may I
Yes.
speak, please? Okay.
Absolutely.
This will definitely be a rebuttal because I need to clear the air here. This whole process was initiated by myself and the Recreation and Marketing Clerical Assistant. This has been an ongoing process. It actually started with the former council that they were wanting someone to do the special events. This did not just come out of the blue. It has been in the works for like I said, 3 years now. The job description that's in front of you is what she is currently doing. There's nothing changing. She's currently doing these jobs right now. The only thing in there is that she would be doing more or assisting the economic development officer. There's no changes in terms of processes that the community groups would have to go through. Those processes are still in place and had been established previously, so she would still be following those processes and things. But I am not trying to hold this person back whatsoever. I have been in support of this position all along, and this person has been thriving and trying to take on more responsibilities and has demonstrated that they can do more. And has been I have been nothing but supportive for this position. But this position, that person has been doing this role for 3 years. So what we were trying to do is wait until a time when things kind of settled, but unfortunately COVID happened. But we were really kind of waiting to see what was happening with the museum as well, and how tourism and the visitor information center kiosk and all that was going to work into it. But the difference is going to be is that the other functions that this person was doing will not be performed. So if you take the grant applications, okay, assisting with the grant applications, there's a whole bunch of administrative things, doing RFPs, tendering, those types of things that will have to fall on someone else, or we will have to look for someone else to take those on and things, unfortunately, because that's part of the role right now. So if this position is taken and put under administration or the economic development officer, then those portions of things would change. And the other point I would like to make is I was asked my opinion. I did not come forward to contradict what the CAO said. I was asked how it would affect. So I don't feel that the comments made tonight are very fair.
Councilor Palmer.
It's turning into a circus, folks, from smugness below me to heavy criticism from the person above me. We're not supposed to do that. I got my hand slapped for being critical of a staff person at one point, and the Reeve was very critical, and that didn't make me feel good at all as a counselor. That was embarrassing, embarrassing for Vicky, actually embarrassing for the Reeve, because we are not to do that. We are not to get into those to characterize people, and he did. And you know, this is getting a little bit off, but we have to be careful, folks, as counselors. We might not agree always with how a staff person came across or said something, but we can't criticize them. I learned my lesson.
Okay, I'm going to bring this back to where we're at. So the report has been granted. The report has been given to us by the CAO. There is a recommended motion that's there. I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to ask for a mover. So let me find it here. So another lengthy motion. So that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report prepared by the CAO dated January 17, 2022 regarding the restructuring of existing staff position for information. And further, that Council approves the elimination of the Recreation Clerical and Marketing Assistant position in favor of a Community Engagement Coordinator position. And further, that Council approves the Community Engagement Coordinator job description as presented and authorizes staff to make the necessary changes to the Township's 2022 salary grid. And further, that Council approves the incumbent Recreation Clerical and Marketing Assistant to assume the duties and responsibilities of the Community Engagement Coordinator effective immediately. And further, that in the event Council grants final approval for an Economic Development Officer, the reporting structure for the Community Engagement Coordinator be authorized to shift from the CAO to the Economic Development Officer at the appropriate time. And further, that Council directs the Treasurer to include the additional $6,000 in the draft 2022 budget to offset cost increase for a Community Engagement Coordinator. So I'm going to put that motion on to see if I can get a mover. It does say as presented. I'm going to change that to say as amended, based on the conversation that Councillor Palmer had brought light to the CAO. Do I have a mover of that motion? Sorry, I got the Reeve Bailey moving.
Kevin, I'll
Do I
move
have a
that.
seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Faulkner seconds it. Clerk Lamb, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sight. And so yes, I've amended that motion so that it reads, and further that Council approves the Community Engagement Coordinator job description as amended to correct the reporting structure change and authorizes staff to make the necessary changes to the 2022 salary grid. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Parts I don't like, but yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Just if I can, Deputy Reeve Sight, I don't keep shutting my video off because I'm upset. I keep shutting off because I'm down to 9% battery. Okay. So if I disappear, guys, it's because I ran out of battery, and I apologize.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to correspondence. So there is, this corresponds requiring action. So there's an Association of the Municipalities of Ontario, a request for a letter of support from AMO to AMO to support the provincial call to action for joint and sever liability. So if council is not aware, we have been pushing for this for a number of years, and I'm glad to see that the AMO is continuing to push forward as well. So there is a recommended motion that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to send a letter that one supports the 7 recommendations contained in the Association of Municipalities of Ontario submission towards a reasonable balance addressing growing municipal liability insurance costs, and 2, ask the province of Ontario to work with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario on a plan for resolution to joint and sever liability concerns before the end of its current mandate. And further, that the letter be sent to the Attorney General, the Honorable Doug Downey, with a copy to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the Honorable Steve Clark, and Association of Municipalities of Ontario President Jamie McGarthy. Do I have a mover of that? I've got Councillor Heifer moving. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor McBurney, thank you very much.
So if there's no questions or comments, I'll call the vote. So Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum, Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
And going to 8.2. So this is Maitland Valley Conservation Authority transition plan to meet MECB regulation requirements under the Conservation Authorities Act. Before I read the motion, does Councillor Van Hittersum have anything to add to this correspondence?
No, I think it's very explanatory. The Conservation Act changed, and the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority is getting plans together. They're working on it. It's yeah, it's an explanation. If people need more explanation about it, we might invite Phil Beard or Dave Turton to our meeting. But right now, this is what's being worked on, and it's a lengthy document for them. I don't think there's any extra needed.
Okay. So the recommended motion is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority transition plan to meet MECB regulatory requirements under the Conservation Authorities Act for information purposes. Do I have a mover for that?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Councillor Van Hittersum moves. I got Miss Councillor Heifer seconding. Is there any questions or comments from councils? Not hearing or seeing any. Yep, not seeing any. Go ahead, Carson.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sight. So Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
So 8.3, which is the Maitland River Elementary School, Sacred Heart Catholic School in Effie Medill. They're requesting for funding for an anti-racism presenter. So really up to council if they would like just to receive that for information or what. I will take any direction. Councillor Heifer. You're on mute, Councillor Heifer.
Sorry, through you, Reeve. Just take it for information. Thank you.
So I got Councillor Heifer moving to keep for information purposes. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Palmer seconding it.
So your draft motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the request for funding for information purposes. So Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson, and Reeve Bailey. So that motion carries 7-0.
So I'm going to pass it back to the Reeve for his Reeve's activity report. Reeve?
I just want to say this has been a very productive, long night. I do want to apologize if certain people thought I got out of line. I put a lot of heart and soul into this. We've moved this community forward. We've moved it forward as a team. And we should treat ourselves as a team and have conversations properly like a team. But we are moving forward, and I appreciate that. We have, I don't think I'm going to say too much more tonight. It's the first meeting, I think, of this year, so we'll just keep moving along. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to council member reports, verbal or written updates from members who sit on boards and committees. Is there anybody who has an update I'd like to break for it? Councillor Van Hitterson right now.
Yes, thank you very much. The North Huron Health Team Board had their meeting. They are still working on their strategic plan because they amalgamated last year. They're looking at a new name, new planning. There's all kinds of new information coming at them, and yeah, we're working on that. It's going very well. Everybody's doing very much their best to make the family health teams in our area one of the best areas in our area in Ontario. Thanks.
Perfect. Any other councillor have any other reports? Not seeing any. Do I have any comments by members? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Reeve. Yeah, I noticed this on Facebook actually, that the Belgrave Kinsmen, they raise money throughout the year, and then they give it back to to some groups, and they wrote a check for approximately $3,400 to the Belgrave School Fair. So I thought that was pretty good.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. Is there any other comments by members? Okay, not seeing any. Move on to, there is no notice of motion at this point. So move on to, bylaws. So bylaw 10.1, bylaw 02/2022, debt management policy. Do I have a mover? Councillor Faulkner moves. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Van Hitterson seconds. Clerk Lamb, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Sight. So Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson, and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
A bylaw number 03/2022, reserve and reserve fund policy. Read a first, second, and third time, signed by the Reeve and Clerk and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that one? Councillor Heffer moves. I got Councillor McBurney seconding. Excuse me.
So Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey. So that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, moving on to 10.3, bylaw number 04/2022. This is going to be introduced, read first, second, and third time, and final time signed by the Reeve and Clerk and engrossed in the bylaw book. This is the zoning bylaw amendment, municipal initiated cannabis housekeeping amendment. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Van Hittersum moves. I got Councillor Faulkner seconding.
So Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
A bylaw number 05/2022, building inspector appointments, read a first, second, and third and final time, signed by the Reeve and Clerk and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that one? Councillor McBurney moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Heifer seconding.
So Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey. So that motion carries 7-0.
Bylaw number 06/2022, terms of reference for a fundraising committee for the North Huron Museum relocation capital project. Be read a first, second, and third and final time, be signed by the Reeve and Clerk and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover? Councillor Faulkner moves. Councillor Heifer seconds.
So Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight, Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Bylaw number 07/2022, land use agreement, Bell Lot. So this is for read first, second, and third and final time, be signed by the Reeve and Clerk and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Heifer moves. I got Councillor Palmer seconding.
So Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight,
Yes.
Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0.
Bylaw 08/2022, Whitfield Municipal Drain Relocation Project 2022 provisional adoption. So this is first and second reading, and provisionally adopted this 17th day of January. Do I have a mover? Councillor McBurney moves. Councillor Faulkner seconds.
So Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
Councillor McBurney, and Deputy Reeve Sipes declared a conflict of interest. So Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heifer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so we have announcements. The next regular council meeting will be held Monday, February 7th at 6 o'clock through electronic participation. The next Economic Development and Recovery Committee meeting will be held Thursday, January 20th at 2 p.m. through electronic participation. The next Wingham BIA board meeting will be held Thursday, January 20th at 6:30 through electronic participation. The next Blythe BIA board meeting will be held Thursday, January 27th at 8 a.m. through electronic participation. So other business, quarter revision, Whitfield Municipal Drain Relocation Project. So this is stating, so the date of recorder revision or draft construction agreement. So a recommended motion that's in our package is that the quarter revision for the Whitfield Municipal Drain Relocation Project 2022 be set for Thursday, February 10th at 9 a.m. through electronic participation, and that construction agreement for the project be drafted and presented subject to any appeals. And further, that any appeals must be received in writing 10 days prior to the quarter revision in accordance with Section 52.2 of the Drainage Act, RSO 1990, Chapter D17, amended by 2010, C16, Schedule 1, Subsection 21. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Heffer moves. Councillor Van Hittersum seconding.
So Councillor McBurney
Yes.
and Deputy Reeve Sipes declared a conflict of interest on this item. So Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0. Sorry.
So the members of the quarter revision. So that the members of the quarter revision for the Whitfield Municipal Drain Relocation Project 2022 shall consist of the following 3 members. So normally,
And if I may,
yep.
if I may, Your Worship or Deputy Reeve Sipes. So just as a reminder, North Huron's appointment bylaw for quarter of revision states that the quarter of revision will consist of the following 3 members: Deputy Reeve Sipe, Councillor Palmer, and Councillor Van Hittersum, and your alternate will be Councillor Heffer. So in this case, if Deputy Reeve Sipe has declared a conflict of interest, basically the draft motion would be that that the members of the quarter revision for the Whitfield Municipal Drain Relocation Project 2022 shall consist of the following 3 members: Councillor Palmer, Councillor Van Hittersum, and Councillor Heffer.
Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Faulkner moves. Seconder, Councillor McBurney seconds.
Would we still need a sub though?
Like as an alternate?
An alternate?
So basically this is just the appointment for this specific quarter revision, right? It doesn't change your appointment bylaw. Basically, if there was another quarter revision, it would still be Deputy Reeve Sipe, Councillor Palmer, and Councillor Van Hittersum, and Councillor Heffer as the alternate. So basically, this is just a situation where, because of a conflict of interest, we need to rely on the alternate, which is why Councillor Heffer would be the next one up in accordance with your appointment bylaw.
Okay, I was just thinking if it went through and there was a court, and then something came up and one of us couldn't make it on the 10th there. That was what I was thinking. That's all. The unforeseen.
Okay.
Do as you wish. It's okay.
Okay, so we're going to, so right now it's number 13, that the council of the township.
So Deputy Sipe, I have to put that to a vote here.
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
So so Deputy Sipes declared on this agenda item. So Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer, Councillor McBurney,
Yes.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 6-0.
Okay, moving into closed session, reporting out, so that the council of the township of North Huron hereby proceed at 9:38 p.m. to an in-camera session closed to the public to discuss the following: a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or a local board, North Huron Museum relocation proposal. And further, that CAO Evans and Clerk Lamb remain in attendance. Do I have a mover for that motion? I've got Councillor Heffer moving. I've got Councillor Van Hittersum seconding.
So Councillor Falconer,
Yes.
Councillor Heffer,
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum,
Yes.
Councillor Palmer, Councillor McBurney, Deputy Reeve Sipe,
Yes, but I'll be of a conflict, so will not be in attendance.
and Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that motion carries 7-0. So we'll end the open session portion of the meeting now, and we'll flip over to the closed.
You have 5 minutes.
Oh, it's past 10, isn't it? We got to do a thing to go past 10 too.
It's 9:30.
Oh, we're good. Yeah, we're good. Let's take 5 minutes. Let's take 5 minutes, and Carson needs that to get this chimed up anyway.
Okay, thank you.